giveaway winner.
Oh, I can't believe this.
Oh my God, this is amazing.
That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon.
I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh, you shocked me. I never won a penny in my life.
If I was there, I'd buy you a drink.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
We'll be there.
This is GB News.
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
it's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have said Storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
something practical could be done.
I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss my big opinion. Mark meets and my take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, GB News can exclusively reveal that more than 15,000 small boat migrants have now crossed the English Channel so far this year alone. A further 315 illegals arrived today, just hours after one died and 72 were rescued after their boat began deflating off the French coast near Calais. And we've got exclusive footage of the arrivals and of that rescue. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer has rolled out the red carpet to 50 leaders from the European political community at Blenheim Palace today. Looks lovely, isn't it? With talks of a reset with Brussels, well, Mr Starmer, who campaigned to cancel Brexit for 5 years, if you remember, well, he now shows true colours. Now he's our Prime Minister. And on the same point, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen was controversially re-elected as president today, but at what cost? With yet more punitive Green Deals in store and backroom deals and no guarantees on border control, what will all of this mean for Britain? That's all coming up in your next hour. You know, today is one of those days where I am just so fired up, I'm finding it difficult to speak. Basically, we can't stop the boats. 15,000 this year alone, including dramatic footage we've got of a British vessel going into French waters to perform a rescue and then taking those people back to France. Where's the French Coast Guard? Meanwhile, why are we rolling out the red carpet to 50 European top brass politicians? And as for Ursula von der Leyen getting voted in again today, 5 years ago, I went to Brussels as an MEP. I voted against Ursula von der Leyen because I saw her for what she was and what she is. Today, she's got another bite at the cherry, and the backroom deals will make your eyes water. I'll have the full details on this show today. Get in touch your way. Did you trust the Keir Starmer on Brexit? Or do you think it's going to rejoin to the European Union? GBNews.com/your say. Have your words. Now it's your headlines. It's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you, and good afternoon to you. It's just coming up to 3 minutes past 3, and the top story this afternoon. Well, Sir Keir Starmer says that the report from the COVID inquiry confirms that the UK was indeed unprepared for the coronavirus outbreak. In the 240-page report released this lunchtime, Baroness Hallett found there were significant and widespread failures from successive governments. That report also condemns the 2011 pandemic strategy for being virtually abandoned when COVID hit, with no focus, she says, on economic and social impacts. 10 recommendations have been made, including more simple approaches to dealing with health emergencies and conducting UK-wide pandemic exercises every 3 years. The Prime Minister says his government are committed to learning from the inquiry, as he expressed his heartfelt sympathies to those who lost their loved ones during the pandemic.
In 2019, it was widely believed in the United Kingdom and abroad that the UK was not only properly prepared, but was one of the best prepared countries in the world to respond to a pandemic. This belief was dangerously mistaken. In reality, the UK was ill-prepared for dealing with the whole system civil emergency of a pandemic, let alone the coronavirus pandemic that actually struck.
Baroness Hallett there speaking after the report was released on the COVID inquiry findings. Well, Volodymyr Zelensky is among more than 40 European leaders meeting in Oxfordshire today, with more support being promised for Ukraine. And earlier, when he arrived, the Ukrainian president said he's counting on Sir Keir Starmer's support.
The UK demonstrated leadership from the very beginning of Russian attacks, and all the strong steps and some not simple steps, always UK began. So I count on my meeting. I will have meeting with Prime Minister, and also bilateral one, and also I will have meeting with the government.
Sir Keir Starmer is hosting that summit, which he is hoping will fire the starting gun on a new relationship with Europe following Brexit. The Prime Minister says he wants to reset our relationship with the continent and to push for closer security ties with other countries. The gathering's been hosted at Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire, the birthplace of Winston Churchill, who he paid tribute to in his opening speech.
We stand for the values that he embodies around the world. Liberty and democracy, yes, of course, but also defiance and resolve in their defence. And today, as a new storm gathers over our continent, we choose to meet it in that same spirit. We want to work with all of you to reset relationships, rediscover our common interest, and renew the bonds of trust and friendship that brighten the fabric of European life.
To the US, and in another blow to Joe Biden's efforts to get re-elected as president, he's now contracted coronavirus, forcing him to pull out of a campaign speech. The White House says the 81-year-old is having mild symptoms from the infection, but they say he is vaccinated, he's boosted and currently isolating while he continues his duties. It comes as the US president's facing growing pressure to step aside because of his age. This morning, in an interview, the US president suggested he would pull out of the race if medical professionals advised him to.
I made a serious mistake in the whole debate. And look, when I originally ran, you may remember it, I said I was going to be a transitional candidate. And I thought that I'd be able to move from this, just pass it on to someone else. But I didn't anticipate things getting so divided. And quite frankly, I think the only thing age brings is a little bit of wisdom. And I think I've demonstrated that I know how to get things done for the country.
Joe Biden there speaking earlier. Well, I just want to bring you a quick line from Reuters that we're seeing in the last hour or so. President Biden reportedly working towards a decision on whether to step aside from the election race. That's according to a telephone interview with Senator John Hickenlooper, suggesting that, as I say, Joe Biden could make that decision, saying it would be the best decision for the US. Senator John Hickenlooper ran, of course, against Biden in 2020, though in that interview he did stop short of suggesting Biden should withdraw. He is implying that a decision is being made on whether Joe Biden will step aside from the election race. Any details on that we will bring to you as we get them. Meanwhile, the families of 2 British men reported to be missing in Sweden are appealing for information on their whereabouts, and it's feared the men could have been victims of a double murder. 33-year-old Juan Cifuentes and Farouk Abdul Razak, who's 37, travelled for a trip there but haven't come home. Officers are now investigating after 2 bodies were found in a burnt-out car in Malmö on Sunday. Local media there reporting that they were shot, though police are still working to identify the victims. The author of an explosive report into the treatment of people taken into custody by Greater Manchester Police is calling for urgent change. Dame Vera Baird carried out the review following reports that 3 women had accused the force of unjustified strip searches after being arrested. She says the inquiry has found that many of those arrests were unnecessary or unlawful. And Greater Manchester Police has now apologised, saying it will accept the recommendations from the inquiry. An experimental drug has found that... Let's start that one again. An experimental drug has found that the lifespan of mice can be increased by 25%, and it's thought that drug could also work on humans. Researchers behind the trials say the animals were injected with an antibody called IL-11, and the treatment cut cancer deaths, reduced chronic inflammation and saw less muscle wasting, all key signs of ageing. Perhaps news presenting too. A pet food made with lab-grown chicken has been approved for sale in the UK. Meatly is the first company ever to get the green light to sell its cultivated meat products in Europe. The firm says it's done tests to prove the food is safe and nutritious for animals. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis. Your next update at 3:30.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam. Now, with a cracking show ahead, so let's get stuck in. So Keir Starmer urged European leaders to address the illegal migration crisis and to stand firm in support of Ukraine as he sought to strengthen the UK's ties with the continent. The Prime Minister is hosting the European Political Community Summit, hoping it will provide an opportunity to reset the UK's relations with its neighbours after the turmoil of the Brexit years. Well, we can now cross to Blenheim Palace and speak with GB News' political correspondent, Catherine Forser. Catherine, it looks absolutely wonderful where you are there. Something of the entente cordiale in the air. Is this Sir Keir Starmer cozying up to Brussels?
Well, first of all, a good afternoon, Martin, from Blenheim Palace, the birthplace, of course, of Sir Winston Churchill. But just first of all, I'm struck again by the immense good fortune that Sir Keir Starmer has had in when Rishi Sunak called the general election, because it's meant that only a week in, he was able to trot off to Washington for that NATO summit, meet a lot of world leaders, and a week later, he's not even been Prime Minister a fortnight yet, here he is hosting 45 European leaders. It's all going very, very well, but the agenda was set, this was all organised under Rishi Sunak, and Sir Keir Starmer is going to get the benefit. But certainly he has made it abundantly clear that he wants a closer and warmer relationship with the European Union. Now, he started off talking, as you would expect, of course, about Ukraine, saying that the Europe's support for Ukraine must remain solid, reassuring President Zelensky. Of course, there is the looming prospect, something which will really worry a lot of European leaders, of President Donald Trump potentially come November and possibly a lot less money coming from the US and a lot less support as well. So Sir Keir Starmer has told his European colleagues, under my leadership, Britain will be a friend and partner ready to work with you, not part of the European Union, but very much part of Europe. And of course, what he wants, apart from cooperation on Ukraine and security, is he is very much focused on tackling the small boats. We've had over 1,000 people cross the Channel since he became Prime Minister. Rwanda has gone. He said it was a gimmick. That's gone in the bin. So he has to crack the gangs. Now, much easier said than done. But clearly, these people are coming all the way across Europe, so you can only do that if you work more closely with Europe. Now, they would like a security agreement to be part of the EU's fingerprinting scheme, so that would give them huge intelligence if they were able to tap into that when people arrived. Also, they've been having small working groups of countries. Giorgia Meloni, who was a great ally of Rishi Sunak, of course, from Italy, chaired one of those. A number of countries involved, because this problem with illegal migration is something which is really at the forefront of many minds in Europe. So Sir Keir Starmer is by no means alone. What he would ultimately like is a returns agreement with the EU. I have to say there's no immediate prospect of that, but we might get little bits and pieces here and there. There'll be a press conference at 5 o'clock, so let's see what emerges.
Okay, Catherine Forster looks resplendent way well there. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. It's worth saying that Emmanuel Macron has said there is no silver bullet to stop the boats. Well, while they're inside enjoying their silver service, literally today, 350 illegal immigrants have arrived on the shores of Britain. And we exclusively revealed on GB News yesterday, if you recall, 1.25 million illegal immigrants arrived in European Union member states last year alone, and they're all being funneled towards our shores. Now, on that same point, more than 15,000 small boat migrants have crossed the Channel so far this year alone. GB News can exclusively reveal the figure was reached after a further 315 migrants made that illegal journey today. And it follows another tragedy in the Channel just hours earlier, when one migrant drowned and another 71 were rescued after their boats began deflating off the French coast near Calais. And I can now show you exclusive radar footage of that journey. So on your screen here, you can see Border Force Ranger. That's a British vessel leaving Ramsgate into French waters there, where it circles for quite some time. This is about 7 p.m. yesterday evening. This is where that craft was deflating. One died in this tragedy. 71 were then picked up. And as you can see shortly, the Border Force Ranger vessel, bear in mind this is a British vessel, now goes to Calais. It's literally performing the service of the French Coast Guard. Where is the French Coast Guard? Border Force Ranger here performing that task. Now, the French, well, they're very happy to bring the dinghies halfway so we take them home. And now here we are last night in that terrible tragedy, one dead, 71 in the water. British vessels taking them back to France. Well, at least they went back to France, I guess. Now, it has also been reported that up to 90,000 migrants who are set for deportation to Rwanda are now to be fast-tracked to claim asylum under the new Labour government. Immigration caseworkers could soon begin processing claims of people threatened for removal to the East African country when the Home Secretary introduces this new legislation. So from Rwanda to the red carpet. Let's speak now to the Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control, Robert Bates. Rob, simply astonishing that not a single flight took off with people who were forced to go to Rwanda. 2 went voluntarily. And now 90,000 earmarked for deportation to Rwanda. They can simply claim asylum and stay in Britain. Rob Bates, quite simply, what message does that send out to the people smugglers?
Well, both sides of the Uni Party have worked very hard on this one together. Obviously, the Conservatives' failure over successive years has led to this position where Labour are now picking up the baton, and the few news stories that you were just covering there seems to suggest that they haven't quite appreciated the scale of the problem and are making a bit of a fudge of it. The decision to allow effectively amnesty to tens of thousands of those that would have been earmarked for Rwanda is essentially putting a huge green light on the White Cliffs of Dover and saying to those migrants that have reached the shores of northern France that you're absolutely entitled to come on over, and we will do absolutely nothing to deport you or to tackle your presence in this country. And I think the British public are going to be watching the way Labour handle this situation over the next few weeks and months, especially as they cozy up further and further into the European embrace, and think that they perhaps haven't appreciated how seriously the British public treat this issue.
And Rob Bates, just to explain, GB News viewers can now see on screen exclusive footage sent to me at GB News of boats arriving this morning. That was the rescue mission from last night. The same Border Force Ranger vessel there that was picking up and taking the vessel that capsized to France. We go back now. This is the same vessel, Border Force Defender there, rolling into Calais this morning. This is shortly after 9:30 this morning. 108 were on that one vessel alone, totalling 315 today. Rob Bates, the weather forecast looks perfect sailing conditions for the next few days or even week ahead. Back to this 90,000 total, though, Rob. The Refugee Council has announced that they expect 60,000 of them to be able to have the right to remain in the UK. Of course, all of those 60,000 who came here illegally will be able to claim housing, benefits, healthcare, and even the right to work. What does this say to the British public, would you say, Rob Bates? We voted in election after election after election to take back control.
It shows absolute contempt. It shows absolute contempt. I would argue the figure will probably be slightly more than 60,000, owing to the fact that the process is being so expedited and fast-tracked that we'll simply end up with caseworkers completely folding at the first semblance of a legal challenge from these asylum seekers' legal representatives, and ultimately the figure will be a lot higher than that. I think what we're seeing here from the Labour Party is a pitch to try and take the pressure off themselves and to present it as a European-wide problem. I think that's definitely what Keir Starmer is trying to do today, and this idea of a reset with the French is a bit rich, given that we haven't really actually had a relationship with the French on this issue over the last few years. You know, we've been very keen to send them hundreds of millions of pounds, but they seem to be doing absolutely nothing to actually help us tackle our illegal migration crisis. So I think a lot of voters that voted for Brexit will be very concerned about the drift that we're seeing back towards Europe, and then a lot of us who are equally concerned about the crisis on our borders will be very concerned, because the closer we work with Europe, the closer we'll end up on the peripheries, if not at the very heart of reallocation programs, and having to take a fair share of those that land on the shores of the Mediterranean as well. So it's an absolute cacophony of mess at the moment.
And Rob, bearing in mind we broke on this programme yesterday, 1.25 million illegal immigrants arrived in European Union member states last year alone. The European Union can't control its own borders. So why on earth would they be interested in doing a deal, or how could they deliver on any form of deal with the United Kingdom to lessen the flow towards us when they can't stop the flow going into their own member states?
Well, I guess that my sense of fair play would dictate that if we are spending them hundreds of millions of pounds to do a job, that they would actually try and put some effort into delivering on that. That clearly doesn't seem to be the case. And you are absolutely right. Europe seems to be switching on to the scale of its problem, and you see a lot of countries now lurching further towards the right as a result of this issue. Just at the same time, we seem to have gone the complete opposite direction. So I think, unfortunately, we seem to be at a soft touch just at the time when European capitals are going to be looking for someone to pile all their problems onto, and unfortunately, it's going to come and bite us in the backside.
OK, Robert Bates, Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control, thank you very much for joining us today on GB News. Right, well, there's still plenty of time to grab your chance to win £30,000 in our Great British Giveaway. It's our biggest cash prize of the year so far, and it's totally tax-free. Now, what would you do with all that extra dough? Well, here's how you could win the lot.
It's our summer treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest cash prize of the year so far. With an extra £30,000 in your bank account this year, you could take the ultimate financial holiday and send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could get you those nagging home improvements done, buy that brand new car, or just enable you to kick back and relax for the rest of the year. For another chance to win £30,000 £3,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Coming up, we'll discuss EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen as she's comfortably re-elected by MEPs for another 5 more years in that top job. We'll be heading to European Union capital for all the latest reaction on that deal. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Khloe Kardashian has come under fire after posting a picture of her 6-year-old daughter wearing a full face of makeup.
Yeah, the reality TV star said the youngster was participating in a dance recital and that wasn't an everyday occurrence.
So this morning we're asking, is it ever OK to let children wear makeup?
Well, joining us now is journalist Julie Cook. So, Julie, it's a child wearing full rouge, bright red lipstick, hair tied back, looking very, very stylised, very much, I think, like a young adult. Is this really the sort of thing we should be doing with small children?
Oh, I think it's absolutely fine. I mean, first of all, in Khloe Kardashian's case, it was a dance recital, so it was very much a kind of performance element to it. She said herself in her post, it wasn't something they do every day. She was taking part in a dance activity. So, you know, I think she's vindicated on that front. But I've let my daughter play with makeup since she was 3. When she was 3, she showed a distinct interest in my makeup palettes, going through my stuff. She's 10 now, and while I don't let her wear a full face like a drag queen, I do let her wear, you know, a bit of mascara on a weekend if she wants to. I don't see any harm in it.
Clearly, if you're a child of a Kardashian who's paid millions of dollars to endorse cosmetics, you know, that's part of the fabric of their family. My concern, though, Julie, is putting those pictures on social media where people can see them. We live in an age now where, you know, wrong-uns are scouring the internet all the time.
A lot of girls do enjoy putting makeup on. It's almost like a self-expression thing. It's like painting on a canvas. They're just trying to be a bit artistic. I don't think it's necessarily as sort of sinister as we're making out. And I think as long as you're not posting pictures everywhere or putting them at risk of harm, I don't see any danger.
The People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 3:25. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, Ursula von der Leyen won support from European Union lawmakers for another 5-year term as president of the European Commission, the EU's powerful executive body. The 720-member European Parliament approved her with 401 votes in favour, 284 against and 15 abstentions. Von der Leyen, who's part of the centre-right European People's Party, was first elected in 2019 and will serve now for another 5 years after she promised to champion European defence with further military spending and committed to sticking to climate targets. And to discuss this now, I'm joined with Brussels-based journalist Jack Parrock. Jack, welcome to the show. So Miss von der Leyen didn't just scrape through, she sailed through as much closer in 2019. Tell us, though, about how she achieved those votes and what kind of backroom deals you think she may have done to get over the line.
Yeah, you could really see the relief on the face of Ursula von der Leyen as the result was announced. 401 MEPs voted in her favour, 41 more than she needed. Last time, as you say, it was only 9 MEPs. That was the margin she had over the majority. She pumped her fist, she stood up, she was really, really pleased. And that's because, like you say, she's been sat in meetings day after day, hour after hour, with MEPs from across the different political spectrum, mainly in the centre bloc, trying to work out what they wanted and what she could say to them in order to secure their votes. This morning, early, quite a few hours before the actual vote took place, she gave a speech where she covered a multitude of different areas. For instance, promising a defence commissioner in her next commission, even a defence fund, talking about the potential for a European air protection mechanism to prevent bombs coming into the EU. She also said that they're going to ramp up Frontex, the EU's border agency, with 3 times the number of guards, up to 30,000 guards. So that shows that she's trying to work towards those harder right factions that got elected in the European elections in June. She did, though, as well suggest that she would have a European housing commissioner. That's a play for the socialists, who are very worried about housing. She tried to cover as many bases as possible. And look, Martin, to be fair to her, it worked.
It did. One thing that leaps out, Jack, is that the Green MEPs, who you remember were pummeled at the European elections, they had a dramatic downturn in support from the public. Green MEPs were celebrating as well, because one of their clauses to give von der Leyen their backing was to make sure that the Green New Deal wasn't watered down. Now, the Green New Deal, of course, Jack Parrott, was what saw so many farmers protest right the way across Europe. The public rejected that policy, but now the Greens, by doing a deal with von der Leyen, have ensured that it will still be law.
Yeah. But let's see how this works out, because what she also announced was a new clean industrial deal. On top of this, I've been speaking just in the last few minutes and hours after this vote came through and the result came through to EU observers and experts. And essentially what she's done, by the looks of things, is saying that she's going to secure the EU Green Deal, that's still the philosophy to get to net zero and make Europe the first climate neutral continent. But instead, what the next 5 years of her presidency of the European Commission is going to focus on is switching from just trying to reduce climate targets, carbon targets and carbon emissions, to instead massively investing in industry and things like clean tech and progressive technology and innovation. And that is something that helps business. So they'll be on her side with that. Important to say, she said she'd announced that within the first 100 days of her leadership of the next European Commission. So we probably won't hear anything about this clearly until early next year, early 2025. But what it does do is shows that she's trying to walk this sort of tightrope between salvaging her green ambitions and supporting the business and industry community, which, again, I mean, it's worked. In this instance, it got her re-elected.
And Jack, there has been a very different metric of MEPs in this term. Of course, we've seen a lot more right-wing MEPs, as you might call them, getting about 25% of the bloc now fall under that. And yet they've been effectively frozen out of any positions of power within committees as vice presidents. The European Union appears to have done what the French did, and they've just formed an alliance, as they always do, to keep the so-called right wing out of any positions of power. This is the EU protecting itself once again, isn't it?
It's a continuation of what's existed in EU politics for a really long time. They call it the cordon sanitaire. It's not a particularly nice term, but it basically means that if you're part of the right, far right or hard right bloc, then you're not really allowed in any of the decision making. The other groups won't vote for you to get those vice presidencies, to take those powerful committees. And that seems to have existed. Now, while that is the case, there have been some MEPs who appear to have broken that. mainly Italian MEPs of Giorgia Meloni's Brothers of Italy party, who sit in not quite the further right parties, but sort of a party at the moment, the European Conformist and Reformist, that was actually set up by the British Conservative Party when we were in the European Union. And they appear to be sort of blurring those lines a little bit. The cordon sanitaire still exists, but you're right. It looks at the moment like most of the people, especially Marine Le Pen's party, etc., they are not getting any of the powerful positions in the next mandate.
It's fascinating stuff, and Giorgia Meloni now appears to become the queen of the right. She's aligned with von der Leyen and the EU on things like Ukraine, and Le Pen and the AfD. They're going to be sidelined. Jack Parrock, that's what the European Union does. It protects itself. It's fascinating stuff. Thank you, as ever, my friend, for your expert insights. Always appreciated. Now, loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including all the details of the public inquiry says that the UK government and the civil service failed the public due to significant flaws in preparing for the COVID-19 pandemic. How about they failed us by locking us all down for 2 years? But first, your latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 3:30, and the top story this afternoon. The COVID-19 inquiry has found the government failed the public because of flawed policy, processes and planning for a pandemic. The 240-page document reveals the government made serious errors and that there were significant flaws in how the outbreak was dealt with in 2020. It also found the measures in place were outdated and complex. Baroness Hallett, who organised the inquiry, has made 10 recommendations to avoid a repeat of what she's described as those fatal flaws in any future health emergency. Sir Keir Starmer says he wants to use today's summit of European leaders to push for joint action on illegal migration. The Prime Minister's hosting around 45 foreign leaders at Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire, with defence, security and energy on the agenda. Earlier, he used his opening speech to reaffirm the UK's support for Ukraine, saying that the threat from Russia reaches right across Europe. In the US, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is reportedly backing calls for President Biden to step aside in the presidential race. White House officials are suggesting she has told Joe Biden he cannot win the November the 5th election, echoing a growing number of Democrats who've raised serious concerns about his ability to defeat Donald Trump. It comes after an assassination attempt on Trump on Saturday, which had initially seemed to reduce pressure on Biden to withdraw. The White House, though, and Pelosi's office have not commented so far as Democrats grapple with the potential shift in their 2024 campaign. And it comes as Joe Biden has been forced to pull out of a campaign speech after contracting coronavirus. And here in the UK, a man who was wrongly convicted of rape and spent 17 years in jail could have been exonerated almost a decade earlier. That's according to a review out today. In light of those findings, Andrew Malkinson says a Criminal Cases Review Commission obstructed his fight for justice and, he says, cost me an extra decade wrongly imprisoned. Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood says that the chairwoman of the Criminal Cases Review Commission is now unfit to fulfil her duties. It's understood that she wants Helen Pitcher to be removed from that position after the findings. A football club in Hertfordshire has paid tribute to one of the British men who's gone missing in Sweden. Juan Cifuentes used to play for Welling Garden City before disappearing alongside Farouk Abdul-Razak. Their families are now appealing for information on their whereabouts amid fears that the men might have been victims of a double murder. And finally, a report has found that officers within the Greater Manchester Police Force have been abusing their power by carrying out unlawful arrests and treating victims as criminals. It was set up after complaints about the treatment of 3 women in custody, and it has found unlawful arrests and strip searches are being carried out. The author of the report, Dame Vera Baird, has made a series of recommendations to make sure more humane and dignified treatment of those in custody is implemented. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis. Polly Middlehurst will have your next update at 4 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam. Now, if you want to get in touch with us here at GB News, simply go to gbnews.com/your say, and I'll read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. Already hundreds coming in. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi again, here's your latest GB News weather forecast coming to you from the Met Office. Temperatures are going to be rising. Plenty of fine weather for many parts of the UK. However, in the northwest, there will still be quite a bit of cloud as we go through the end of the week and further rain to come too. We currently have a weather system which is gradually making its way a little bit further eastwards, but this is going to break up as we go through the day. So a little bit less rain overnight, and any rain over Scotland likely to be confined just to the higher ground, and most other places turning dry. After a warm evening across England and Wales in particular, it is going to be a warm night. Not a huge amount of cloud around, but temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Some places staying with temperatures around 17 or 18 degrees. First thing tomorrow morning, there could be a few pockets of mist and fog around western parts of England and Wales perhaps, but for much of England and Wales it is going to be a fine start. Plenty of sunshine, and with that temperatures are going to start to rise pretty quickly. A cloudier story though across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Perhaps not as cloudy as today, but nonetheless a few spots of rain are possible as we go through the morning. Perhaps the brightest weather will be across more eastern parts of Scotland. A greater chance of seeing some sunshine here. Through the day we are going to see a bit more cloud building across far western parts of Scotland. In the Outer Hebrides, some rain pushing its way in here, and there could be some strong blustery winds to go with it. Elsewhere, and for Scotland, Northern Ireland, a drier day than today and a little bit brighter at times, but the best of the sunshine will be across much of England and Wales, and with that temperatures rising higher than today, highs of around 31 Celsius in the southeast, but everywhere it is going to feel relatively hot. As we go through the evening, we are going to see a bit more cloud and rain feeding into far northwestern parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but staying fine towards the southeast. There will be some wet weather pushing its way through as we go through Saturday and into Sunday, but Saturday could stay hot in the southeast. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. The Bells Hill bypass, the A725, still closed between the M8 junction 7A at Bells Hill and the A8, that's the Shorehead flyover. Now that's for investigation works and naturally causing queues. Just on the English side of the Welsh-English border, Whitchurch in Shropshire, the Wrexham Road bypass, the A41 shut both ways between the A49 at the Chester Road roundabout and the A525 at the Whitchurch Services roundabout. Again, this one's causing queues. A collision is being investigated. Anti-clock M25 slow, 16 to 15, so towards the M4 follows an earlier breakdown, and a few stretches of the A24 closed in Surrey, northbound shut from the Bear Green roundabout up towards the Deepdean roundabout in Dorking, also closed northbound Pixham Lane up to the Gibbons Grove roundabout Leatherhead, southbound shut from the Deepdean roundabout down towards Flint Hill.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:39. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. The COVID UK Inquiry 19 inquiry has published its first report today, laying bare the failures of the UK to properly prepare for a pandemic. The 240-page document reveals there were significant flaws in how the outbreak was dealt with in 2020, and people were failed by lack of preparation for a pandemic. Well, our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, joins us now. Mark White, welcome to the show. So what can you tell us about the latest? They're saying that we're failed by a lack of preparation. Perhaps the bigger question is we were failed by a government that locked us down for 2 years and destroyed the economy.
Well, that aspect is certainly looked at in Baroness Hallett's report as well and is addressed. But she says in terms of our preparedness for COVID-19 that there was a complacency within government circles, a belief, a mistaken belief, that the UK was one of the best countries in the world when it came to its preparedness for a pandemic. But she said they were preparing for the wrong kind of pandemic. They were focused on an influenza-type viral outbreak rather than looking at the coronavirus outbreaks which had been observed in parts of Asia and the Middle East in the years running up to this pandemic. And that plan, such as it was in a plan that was devised in 2011, was just not robust enough. It didn't stand up to testing when the virus struck. And really, within no time at all of the outbreak striking the UK, those plans, she says, were simply tossed aside. And on that point about whether we should have been locking down to the extent we were in the first place, she says she believes that the plans failed to adequately consider prevention or proportionality of response, and also paid insufficient attention to the economic and social consequences of pandemic response. Well, we've been hearing from family members, lawyers representing some of the family members, including one lawyer representing 7,000 family members who welcomed these initial findings but said that the government had to now implement the recommendations made by Baroness Hallett.
The preparedness was completely inadequate, and the chair of the inquiry recognised that in her report, and the families are pleased to see her recognition of it. We're also pleased to see, on the whole, the recommendations that follow, although there are certain areas we'd have liked to see further clarity, I think. Yeah, they were obsessed with the influenza pandemic, but even on that basis, they were not well prepared for that. There was really no preparedness at all, and it's not just for pandemics. I suspect we are poorly prepared for all sorts of emergencies and disasters.
Well, Baroness Hallett has still another 9 reports to publish over the next couple of years. The recommendations she's come out with today are 10 recommendations, key amongst them the creation of a statutory independent body to look after the country's preparedness for a future pandemic.
OK, thanks for joining us, Mark White. Superb as ever. Thank you. Now, moving on, the Welsh Parliament has come under fire once again, this time for passing a bill that offers financial assistance schemes to promote diversity in candidates. Our national reporter, Charlie Peters, is here to tell us more. Charlie, welcome to the show. So I'm assuming when they say to promote diversity, they don't mean to promote diversity amongst everyone, they mean amongst certain groups. Tell us more.
Well, Martin, they won't tell us which certain groups they want to promote that diversity in, because this new bill passed on its 4th reading last week in the Senate. It's called the Elections and Elected Bodies Bill. Does contain a section saying that the government has to promote diversity, and part of that includes recognising and understanding if there are any underrepresented groups, not only in the Welsh Parliament, in the Senate in Cardiff, but also county councils and local bodies across the country. But it's the next section that has attracted some criticism when I've raised it with commentators, which is section 28, where the Welsh Government now says that ministers have the power to gather funds to give cash to those who have specified characteristics if they are candidates running for election. Well, the Welsh Government won't tell me which specified characteristics do now make someone open to receiving these funds if they're running for an election. Well, the Counsel General, the former Counsel General, he's now resigned over the First Minister this week, did say that this was a radical and groundbreaking bill, that the bill's wider aim is to advance democracy in Wales. It's going to start the process for adding 400,000 new people to the electoral roll by automatically registering people there. There's going to be a new website for signing up to the electoral roll as well. But it's these concerns about this new plan for cash for diversity that has attracted that concern. A representative from the Taxpayers Alliance yesterday telling me that the Welsh Government should scrap this plan, that it was likely going to be costly and that it was divisive, and that people in Wales should be focusing on the quality of candidates, not their characteristics, not their identity backgrounds. Now, in response to this criticism and me raising some questions, the Welsh Government, a spokesperson from the Welsh Government, said to me that it's vital that our elected bodies represent the diversity of people in Wales, And this legislation will pave the way in tackling barriers to participation. We will set out proposals for what these protected characteristics will be shortly, and these will be developed and consulted upon widely. All regulations will have to be agreed by the Senedd, and we will play no part in determining any financial assistance to individual candidates. Well, there you have it. They've passed this law, more cash for candidates, but they won't tell us what characteristics they will be and who could receive this cash.
Utterly ridiculous. I think we all know what those protected characteristics are. They haven't even got the guts to tell us. Charlie Peters, thank you very much for joining us. Now, don't go anywhere, because up next we'll cross live to Milwaukee ahead of Donald Trump's acceptance speech as he becomes the official Republican presidential nominee. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Now, time for the best part of the show, our Greatest Britain, where we share amazing people who do amazing things. And this week, that is Dr. Leo Cheng and Reverend Hilary Cheng.
Well, Dr. Cheng regularly serves as a volunteer surgeon aboard the Mercy ships in West Africa and has recently served his 17th mission aboard the ships. He volunteers with his wife, Reverend Hilary Cheng, a Methodist minister in the UK.
Thank you for joining us, and what a privilege. So just briefly explain, what are Mercy ships?
Well, Mercy ships provide world-class surgery on the ship, and the ship then sail to these poorest of the poor country because there's no infrastructure to get road or rail there. And we offer free surgery and also education, training of medical staff, and partner with the local or the host nation to build up their surgical and anaesthetic services.
So how long have you been travelling West Africa? You go on all these different ships, different ports, and you treat the needy and the vulnerable. How long have you both been doing this?
20 years.
20 years?
Just over 20 years.
And you take the time to do this out of your own holiday from work. Why do you do it?
Well, because I'm indebted to the education in this country with all the qualification I get. And NHS is great. I love the NHS because without NHS, we see cases that we see in the low-income country. And I want to make use of my hand to help those people who have no way of helping themselves, because the tumours, the deformities, not just a physical ailment, but it's being ostracised and die early, commit suicide because they've been ostracised by their family.
When you're on the ship, you are seeing the very worst that the country can offer. I find it a great privilege to work alongside these people.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10 to 4. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, tonight, Donald Trump is expected to speak for the first time since he was shot at a rally as he accepts the Republican nomination for presidency. He plans to build on his running mate J.D. Vance's vow to champion the forgotten Americans, with the central theme being to kickstart a golden age and make America great once again. Let's cross now to Milwaukee and join our man Ray Addison, who is there on the ground. Ray, welcome to the show. Ray, so just 5 days ago...
Good morning to you, Martin.
So, Ray, just 5 days ago, they tried to assassinate Donald Trump. Now he's back making a massively anticipated speech. Tell us everything about it, Ray.
Yeah, really, there is a huge sense of anticipation here, Martin, as you said, and what a beautiful day it is as well. It's about 9:50 a.m. here in Milwaukee, shaping up to be an absolutely gorgeous day, not just for the city, but potentially for Donald Trump as well, as we build up to that speech where he closes up the RNC convention and accepts the formal nomination from the Republican Party to be their presidential nominee. Now, a good day for Trump, not such a good day for President Biden, hearing in the last sort of 10-15 minutes or so that House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi has told President Biden that she believes he cannot win the election on November 5th, and she is now supporting calls for him to drop out. And where Nancy Pelosi starts, many other significant Democratic figures will no doubt follow. And obviously this, we're hearing of this morning, by the end of the day, there could be a flood of very senior Democrat figures calling for President Biden to stand aside. So that's a real blow for him. He had to cancel his speech yesterday as well in Las Vegas. He's got COVID, we're told, although there's a bit of skepticism here among delegates and party members as to whether that is the case or not. But yes, a bad day for President Biden, it would appear. Donald Trump will be coming here later on to close up that speech. Is going to be around 2-3 a.m. UK time, and the campaign has just got a lot of momentum at the moment, Martin. You know, after that assassination attempt on Saturday, 5 days ago, as you said, there's been a coalescing around their candidate where people had doubts. They seem to be now following him and putting their support behind him. I spoke to some people here earlier on to see what they expected Trump to say tonight.
What he wants to do to make America great again, you know. I do think after this assassination attempt that he's going to try to be a little more unifying.
It's called veritatis splendor in Latin, the splendor of truth.
Yes.
Hoorah!
We're going to get some truth from him.
These lying punks. I'm really hoping that he reaches out across the aisle and talks to everybody.
Look, I'm super pumped. I can't wait to hear his speech, and I think it'll be even more emotional.
So Trump closing out the conference. Before him, Eric Trump, you can see him just down there, his son. He's giving an impromptu press conference there. He'll be making a speech. Who else? We've got Hulk Hogan as well, Tucker Carlson, and then in true Donald Trump style, we're going to be hearing from UFC CEO Dana White as well. He's going to introduce Donald Trump tonight.
Supers of reality, and it certainly feels like all the energy is with Team Trump. Talk about Hulk Hogan showing up, having Joe Biden on the ropes. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, don't go anywhere, because we'll be discussing the huge news that 15,000 small boats migrants have crossed the English Channel so far this year alone, whilst the Home Secretary looks to give amnesty to 90,000 migrants who had been earmarked for flights to Rwanda. Exclusive pictures there on your screens for GB News of those people coming ashore today. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. Now it's your weather with Alex Burkill.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi again, here's your latest GB News weather forecast coming to you from the Met Office. Temperatures are going to be rising. Plenty of fine weather for many parts of the UK. However, in the northwest, there will still be quite a bit of cloud as we go through the end of the week, and further rain to come too. We currently have a weather system which is gradually making its way a little bit further eastwards, but this is going to break up as we go through the day. So a little bit less rain overnight, and any rain over Scotland likely to be confined just to the higher ground, and most other places turning dry. After a warm evening across England and Wales in particular, it is going to be a warm night. Not a huge amount of cloud around, but temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Some places staying with temperatures around 17 or 18 degrees. First thing tomorrow morning, there could be a few pockets of mist and fog around western parts of England and Wales perhaps, but for much of England and Wales it is going to be a fine start. Plenty of sunshine, and with that temperatures are going to start to rise pretty quickly. A cloudier story though across parts parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Perhaps not as cloudy as today, but nonetheless, a few spots of rain are possible as we go through the morning. Perhaps the brightest weather will be across more eastern parts of Scotland, a greater chance of seeing some sunshine here. Through the day, we are going to see a bit more cloud building across far western parts of Scotland. In the Outer Hebrides, some rain pushing its way in here, and there could be some strong blustery winds to go with it. Elsewhere, and for Scotland, Northern Ireland, a drier day than today and a little bit brighter at times, but the best of the sunshine will be across much of England and Wales, and with that, temperatures rising higher than today, highs of around 31 Celsius in the southeast, but everywhere it is going to feel relatively hot. As we go through the evening, we are going to see a bit more cloud and rain feeding into far northwestern parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but staying fine towards the southeast. There will be some wet weather pushing its way through as we go through Saturday and into Sunday, but Saturday could stay hot in the southeast. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to Bellshill, the bypass, the A725 in North Lanarkshire, still shut between the A8 at the Shorehead flyover and the M8 junction 7A. Investigation work continues, follows a previous accident, still looking very slow going. Now to Little Lee in Cheshire, the Runcorn Road, the A533, still closed between Whole House Lane and Shutley Lane. Again, investigation works underway. A collision being investigated too, the Wrexham Road bypass, the A41. This is west of Whitchurch in Shropshire, shut between the A49 at the Chester Road roundabout and the A525, the Wrexham Road at the Whitchurch Services roundabout. So that investigation work continues. That's an A41 stretch closed in both directions and of course causing queues on all approaches to both roundabouts now. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
It's our summer treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest cash prize of the year so far. With an extra £30,000 in your bank account this year, you could take the ultimate financial holiday and send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could get you those nagging home improvements done, buy that brand new car, or just enable you to kick back and relax for the rest of the year. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. Coming up, GB News can exclusively reveal that more than 15,000 small boats migrants have crossed the English Channel so far this year. A further 315 illegals arrived today alone, just hours after one died and 72 were rescued after their boats began deflating off the French coast near Calais. We've got some exclusive footage of the arrivals and of that rescue mission. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer has rolled out the red carpet to 50 leaders from the European political community at Blenheim Palace today, with talks of a reset with Brussels. Will Mr Starmer, who, lest we forget, campaigned to cancel Brexit for 5 years, will he now show his true colours now that he's our Prime Minister? Plus, European Commission's Ursula von der Leyen was controversially re-elected as their president today, but at what cost? With yet more punitive Green Deals in store and no guarantees on border control. What will this mean for Britain? We'll have full analysis. Well, the show, always a pleasure to have your company. Is it time to just admit we can't stop the boats? Do we actually want to stop the boats? 15,000 now this year alone, and we're heading for a bumper week with mill pond seas in the Channel. 315 rocked up to Dover today. We've got some exclusive footage of that, and an incredible rescue mission in French waters performed by a British vessel who then took those on board that deflating vessel back to Calais. What on earth are we doing out in French waters? Where are the French coast guards? Do our politicians have the guts to ever stop this? They can't control their own borders in the European Union. Will this ever end? Let me know your thoughts. GBNews.com/your say. But before all of that, it's your headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon to you. Well, Sir Keir Starmer says today's COVID inquiry report has confirmed that the UK was unprepared for the coronavirus outbreak. The 240-page assessment released this lunchtime by Baroness Hallett found there were significant and widespread failures by successive governments. The report also condemns the 2011 pandemic strategy for being virtually abandoned when COVID hit, with no focus on economic and social impacts. 10 recommendations have been made, including a more streamlined approach to dealing with health emergencies and conducting UK-wide pandemic exercises every 3 years. The Prime Minister says his government is committed to learning from the inquiry and expressed his heartfelt sympathies to those who lost loved ones during the pandemic.
In 2019, it was widely believed in the United Kingdom and abroad that the UK was not only properly prepared, but was one of the best prepared countries in the world to respond to a pandemic. This belief was dangerously mistaken. In reality, the UK was ill prepared for dealing with the whole system civil emergency of a pandemic, let alone the coronavirus pandemic that actually struck.
Baroness Hallett speaking there. Now, Volodymyr Zelensky is among more than 40 European leaders meeting in the UK today, offering more support for Ukraine. And the Ukrainian president says he's counting on Sir Keir Starmer's support.
The UK demonstrated leadership from the very beginning of Russian attacks, and all the strong steps and some not simple steps always UK began. So I count on my meeting. I will have meeting with Prime Minister, and also bilateral one, and also I will have meeting with the government.
Volodymyr Zelensky speaking there. Well, Sir Keir Starmer's hosting the summit at Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire, which he hopes will fire the starting gun on a new relationship with the EU. The Prime Minister says he wants to reset our relationship and push for closer security ties with our near neighbours. The group have agreed on boosting defence capabilities in Ukraine as it defends itself from Russia.
We stand for the values that he embodies around the world. Liberty and democracy, yes, of course, but also defiance and resolve in their defence. And today, as a new storm gathers over our continent, we choose to meet it in that same spirit. We want to work with all of you to reset relationships, rediscover our common interest, and renew the bonds of trust and friendship that brighten the fabric of European life.
Well, in the United States, the former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is reportedly backing calls for President Joe Biden to step aside in the presidential race. White House officials are now suggesting she's told Joe Biden personally he can't win the November the 5th election, echoing a growing number of Democrats who've raised serious concerns about the president's ability to defeat Donald Trump. It comes after the assassination attempt on Mr. Trump on Saturday, which had initially seemed to reduce some of the pressure on Joe Biden. Well, the White House and Pelosi's office haven't commented as Democrats grapple with the potential shift in their 2020 campaign strategy, but it does come as Joe Biden has been forced to pull out of a campaign speech after his team says contracting coronavirus.
I made a serious mistake in the whole debate. And look, when I originally ran, you may remember it, I said I was going to be a transitional candidate. And I thought that I'd be able to move from this, just pass it on to someone else. But I didn't anticipate things getting so divided. And quite frankly, I think the only thing age brings is a little bit of wisdom. And I think I've demonstrated that I know how to get things done for the country.
Joe Biden. Now here, one person has died and 71 people have been rescued after a migrant boat sank in the English Channel late last night. All those on board the vessel ended up in the water, but were picked up in a joint rescue operation between the UK and the French authorities. And just lastly, a heat health alert has had to be issued for parts of England. Temperatures set to reach 30 degrees Celsius tomorrow. The UK Health Security Agency alerts cover the East Midlands, East England, London and the South East from tomorrow right through to Saturday. It warns that expected hot weather may impact the social and health care sector. Check on your neighbours. Make sure the elderly have plenty to drink. It's going to be a great weekend. Those are the headlines for now. I'm back in half an hour with more. See you then.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now, Sir Keir Starmer urged European leaders to address the illegal migration crisis and to stand firm in support of Ukraine as he sought to strengthen the UK's ties with the continent. The Prime Minister is hosting the European Political Community Summit, hoping it will provide an opportunity to reset the UK's relations with its neighbours after the turmoil of the Brexit years. Well, we can now cross to Blenheim Palace and speak with GB News' political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, welcome to the show. It looks absolutely wonderful behind you there. Is this, we saw in Washington at the NATO summit, Sir Keir Starmer cozying up to European leaders, but that was a tea party compared to this. This is the real deal. It looks like a Brussels love-in. Tell us more.
Yes, good afternoon, Martin. It's pretty much a perfect summer's afternoon here at Blenheim Palace, the birthplace of Sir Winston Churchill, of course. And we've long heard it, haven't we, from Sir Keir Starmer, that if Labour came to power, they would seek a closer relationship with the European Union. And of course, they've said that doesn't mean going back in, it doesn't mean the single market, it doesn't mean the customs union, but they do want to increase our links. And let's face it, having just thrown the Rwanda plan in the bin, they say they're going to crack down on the smuggling gangs. Well, they can't do that alone, clearly, because these people come right the way across Europe to get here. So this summit, all arranged by Rishi Sunak, but Sir Keir Starmer has got the good fortune now to capitalise on it. 45 leaders of EU countries and non-EU European countries. A big focus, of course, on security, on Ukraine, on support for Volodymyr Zelensky against Russia, but a very big focus too on illegal migration, something that's affecting the whole of Europe. Giorgia Meloni, the PM Italy, who had a great relationship with Rishi Sunak, has hosted a working group here. So Keir Starmer was in that, along with a whole host of other countries. He wants a security pact. He wants access to fingerprinting information. He wants to be working upstream with all these other countries. Of course, there's nothing easy about any of this, and he will be having dinner with Emmanuel Macron, the French president, tonight. Could there be movement? We've already got nearly 500 million tied up in the deal that we have with France. Could there be further movement there now? So Keir Starmer will be holding a press conference at 5 o'clock. We'll be bringing that to you, and the latest from this as the day wraps up a little bit later.
Superb stuff. Thank you very much, Catherine Forster, for joining us on the show. Thank you. Now, more than 15,000 small boats migrants have crossed the English Channel so far this year. GB News can exclusively reveal today. The figure was reached after a further 315 migrants made the illegal journey today. And it follows another tragedy in the Channel just hours earlier, when one migrant drowned and another 71 were rescued after their boat began deflating off the French coast near Calais. And I can now show you this is footage of boats rolling into Dover earlier on today. And this is a Border Force Ranger vessel leaving Ramsgate, and you can see there circling. This is that disaster last night where one tragically died, 71 went overboard after a craft deflated. This is a British vessel performing a rescue mission, and you'll now see shortly that vessel, Border Force Ranger, moves towards Calais, as you can see now, going back to Calais. A British vessel in French waters performing a rescue mission. Begs the question, why are British vessels so deep in French waters getting involved? Of course, this was a disaster. People's lives were at risk, but where were the French in that issue? Now, it's also been reported that up to 90,000 migrants who were set for deportation to Rwanda are now instead to be fast-tracked to claim asylum under the new Labour government. Immigration caseworkers could soon begin processing claims of people threatened for removal to the East African country when the Home Secretary introduces this new legislation. Quite a change of position, isn't it? And to discuss that, I'm now joined by the former Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, Jonathan Goodis. Jonathan, welcome to the show. It's been a long time. Hope you're keeping well. So we've gone from Rwanda to rolling out the red carpet. It seems the Refugee Council today has announced that of these 90,000 who are now able to apply for asylum, 60,000 will probably get the right to remain. Jonathan Goodis, what message does that send out to the people smugglers?
Well, Martin, it's what we were warning for so long, and particularly during the election campaign, that Labour's migrant amnesty is in full swing. And it's just very sad to see that people who wanted to see tough action on the borders, wanted us to take back control, wanted us to have that deterrent in Rwanda has sadly been robbed. And Labour have lazily assumed that whilst they did indeed, of course, win the election, it was a very shallow victory when you look at how many votes across Conservatives, Reform UK, who, collectively were the most vocal voices for making sure that we had that effective deterrent, who wanted to see us stop the boats. And I think it sends the entirely wrong message. It will essentially aid and abet the smuggling gangs in their operational model, be able to convince more and more people, thousands more people, to hand over their thousands of pounds to get in unseaworthy vessels and attempt to come over to this country illegally if they think they have the very high chance of being processed and therefore the very high chance of being approved to remain. Unless Labour's going to suddenly announce they're going to do returns deals with Iran, with Syria, with Afghanistan, which, let's be honest, we don't think is going to happen, and nor would it be appropriate for us to send taxpayers' money to such countries where they would abuse the human rights of the individuals that we send back there.
Doesn't that point to a quandary? Jonathan, it's fair to say that Rishi Sunak couldn't stop the boats any more than King Canute could stop the tide. Doesn't seem that anybody can do this. And in fact, that's why the Reform Party probably gained so many votes on the Conservatives, that the immigration, the small boats, the illegal immigration, as well as illegal immigration into the country was a huge dividing point. But what do we do? What do we do? It seems that we've gone from the effective offshore processing deterrent. Rwanda had its problems. Only 2 people went voluntary. Nobody was ever forcefully deported. Will we face the same old issue of the European Court of Human Rights lawyers simply blocking any form of deportations? Jonathan, you can see on your screen now exclusive pictures obtained by GB News. This is Border Force Defender rolling ashore this morning, 315 in one day. Can we ever stop this, or are we just stuck with it?
Well, look, Martin, I think you've raised some very fair questions there. Essentially, the Rwanda deterrent, I believe, would have been very effective, but sadly, obviously, we were unable to get it going before the general election and weren't able to win the election in order to display what I believe would have happened, which is people getting on planes, taken to Rwanda, a safe third country to start their lives, and ultimately would have smashed apart the operational model of the smuggling gangs. But, you know, that decision by Labour has meant that we have now no effective deterrent. They're now scrapping the right for people, scrapping the law change, which said that if you come here illegally, you can't claim asylum. So now they're saying you can. That, again, aids and abets the smuggling gangs. And then on top of that, we can also see the fact that it's all well and good rebranding Small Boats Command. It's all well and good saying you'll do another deal with France, which will see, I'm sure, more taxpayers' money. It's all well and good saying that you want to use some foreign aid funding down the line in places like the Horn of Africa, where we know some of these migrants have come from. But until you tackle the fact that these people are predominantly coming from countries like Syria, like Iran, like Afghanistan, as they're claiming, the fact that over 80% of them are young, single men, until we realise the reality here, which is that we need to put them on planes, immediately deport them, and whilst they're waiting in this country, they must be detained, not in hotels, not in social housing, but detained, so they understand that they don't have the liberties and freedoms that you and I enjoy because we're law-abiding citizens. Then essentially we're just opening ourselves up further down the track. And I think that it's just a very sad day to see that Labour, I think, has this as their biggest weakness. And despite all the talk, I think the reality is we'll just see more and more boats coming over and very little actually done apart from tough rhetoric regarding more deals with France, more schemes with Europe. I mean, I think it was reported to Martin today in the Times that Sir Keir Starmer is open to the negotiations with the EU of us being able to send to the EU, let's say, an illegal migrant, but then obviously being able to accept one back off them in return. What does that do? Absolutely nothing, because it's one in, one out. And that's not what we should be doing. It should be zero in and everyone out who's come here illegally.
Jonathan, today at Blenheim Palace, Sir Keir Starmer was with 50 European leaders. Of course, that was a meeting set up by Rishi Sunak. It's an annual event that was going to happen anyway. But in terms of looking to our European partners as they're called for solutions to this, how's that going to work? We revealed on the channel yesterday there have been 1.265 million illegal immigrants into 27 EU member states last year alone. Millions and millions across the countries when you add them up over the past 10 years. Jonathan Gunnis, if the European Union can't control their own porous borders, how the heck are they going to stop that inexorable flow of human traffic towards the French coast? And why would they want to stop it?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head here. And I think if the European Union doesn't learn from the absolute drubbing that the centrist and left-wing parties received in those recent elections that saw the rise of centre-right and right-wing parties across Europe who all want to see much tougher and firmer action on migration, both legal and illegal, then obviously you'll see more unrest in Europe, which is not what we want to see, as well as a lack of social cohesion that we sadly see in certain parts of our United Kingdom. That's not what I or you or anyone else who's watching wants to see either. And I think it's therefore absolutely important that we look at countries, for example, like Hungary, who have very firm stances. Viktor Orban, I think, has done a remarkable job. Poland, under the former leadership of the Law and Justice Party, also had a very firm stance when it came to tackling illegal migration as well. And essentially, it's by working together collaboratively to offshore people, put people on planes, deport them to safe third countries. If we can do that collectively as an area, then I think we will, obviously, as I say, deter people from thinking that this is a journey worth risking. And it's, I think, important, and you always get it right, Martin, there's a huge difference. There are people who are human trafficked, and that's an absolute tragedy. But that is a small percentage of those coming here illegally via the small boats. Most of them are smuggled here. Those are people, therefore, migrants choosing to risk their lives, choosing to give thousands of pounds to smuggling gangs, choosing to get into small boats, choosing to enter our country illegally or mainland Europe. And that is an abomination. We cannot stand for it. Borders control, sovereignty is something that is invaluable to every nation across this great world of ours. And we see, therefore, why Joe Biden on the United States side is also going to be in huge trouble when it comes to the fact that we see people flooding across the southern border, and why President Trump and his vice presidential nominee, J.D. Vance, I think a very fine combination of individuals, will hopefully take the presidency in November this year.
And Jonathan, may I quickly ask you a personal question? You unfortunately lost your seat, as did many Conservatives at the general election. Do you have any plans to get back into politics?
So I'm coming to you live from a very empty office as I'm packing up. Today's my last day in the constituency office before I hand the keys back to the landlord. I would love, of course, to return to the green benches one day in the future, but that is a long way off. I'd have to find whether or not my local association here or anywhere else were willing to have me. But I'm not done in Westminster yet, but I hope to be a strong voice for the Conservative Party from the outside in the coming weeks and months ahead, particularly around the leadership, where I'd be personally backing Priti Patel to become the leader of the Conservative Party, someone who was served William Hague in his private office when we were in opposition after a big electoral defeat, someone who served under Cameron, May and Johnson, so is able to appeal to the broad breadth of the Conservative Party, someone who didn't serve under Rishi or Truss and therefore isn't tainted by those two administrations, but someone Reform will themselves fear, someone who was a Spartan when it came to Brexit, someone who voted against Windsor Framework, someone who is therefore very strong, very principled, and has a massive charm and personality that will galvanise and energise our base and our members. And I think, therefore, we can take the fight back.
Jonathan, I'm smiling because I can still see you got that fire in your belly. Jonathan Gullis, thank you very much for joining us on GB News. And it's always sad to see an office being packed up, but I'm sure there'll be another chapter. All the best. Take care.
Thank you, my friend.
Now, on the way, we'll discuss EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen as she's come to be re-elected by MEPs for another 5 years in the top job. We'll be heading to the European Union capital for all the latest reaction on the backroom deals that got her to power. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop star to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Meghan Markle has reportedly finished filming her new show for Netflix. It aims to celebrate the joys of cooking, gardening, entertaining and friendship.
Yeah, this comes after Prince Harry's Netflix documentary, The Heart of Invictus, failed to hit the right note with viewers missing out on the top 10 in the streaming charts.
So, will this next venture be a success? Well, joining us now is royal commentator Kinsey Schofield.
I know I've talked to the both of you about Meghan Markle potentially running for president, so this feels like a bit of a dud to go from Meghan Markle running for president to Meghan Markle's Netflix series about friendship and cooking. So she's wrapped this recent show. They rented a home near hers in Montecito so that as their cooking set. And they're saying that this is really make or break for Harry and Meghan when it comes to their Netflix contract.
You think, Kinsey, it's fair to say that Meghan Markle has proved to be commercially a bit of a damp squib? Even in America, her native homeland, she's kind of Oprah without the audience when it comes to the cooking. Also, is she kind of, do you think... They saw her as the golden ticket, didn't they, to unlimited revenue, unlimited audiences, and it just hasn't happened.
Look, I think Meghan is a beautiful woman, and I do think she's talented, but I think how you treat people is incredibly important. And not only was she rumored to have been cruel inside Kensington Palace with several bullying allegations, but here in the States, Archwell Productions, their audio section, their scripted section, they've gone through several employees. And I think it's a reflection on the way that people are treated there. And I think as a viewer, you might get that. You might feel that way. And maybe that is where the appeal has been lost.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:25. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, Ursula von der Leyen won support from European Union lawmakers for another 5-year term as President of the European Commission, the EU's most powerful executive body. The 720-member European Parliament approved her with 401 votes in favour, 284 against and 15 abstentions. Now, von der Leyen, who is part of the centre-right European People's Party, was first elected in 2019 and will now serve for another 5 years after she promised to champion European defence with further military spending and committed to sticking, of course, to climate targets. Well, joining me now to discuss this and chew over the backroom deals is Peter Clapp, Editor-in-Chief of Brussels Reports. Welcome to the show, Peter. So, in 2019, when I voted, it was a narrow margin of only 9 votes. Today, Ursula von der Leyen, in comparison, she breezed home. But, Peter, the big question is, what kind of deals and with whom did she have to do to ensure she got that margin?
Well, crucially, she managed to convince the Greens to support her, and that is very worrying. You know, it's one thing that her own faction, the EPP, supported her, very questionable, but well, and the Socialists, of course, and the centrist Renew group. But the fact that the Greens support her means that she has made it clear to them that she will not be unwinding the European Green Deal. Now, the European Green Deal is a huge package of regulations, policy, central planning, really, that is imposing very expensive climate targets on industry, on farmers, which is why we saw all those protests. In the European Parliament elections, all the politicians and political parties that were supporting the Green Deal, they were by and large punished by voters. And nevertheless, we now see the face of the Green Deal, Ms. von der Leyen, back in charge.
And Peter, that's an excellent point, and one I'd like to delve into a little bit further. Isn't this just indicative of how Brussels worked? The electorate gave the Greens a battering at the elections in May. They totally, not totally, but they rejected the Green Deal after those farmers' protests that we saw across Holland, across Belgium, even in Brussels itself, where they were setting fire to tyres right outside von der Leyen's office. They were getting deals changed on cheap importation of meat and vegetables from South America into the European Union. And then the electorate thought, they had a say. And today, the Greens were cheering. They were whooping with delight when von der Leyen got home, because even though the public rejected them, von der Leyen is making sure that their politics becomes law.
Well, and von der Leyen is really left green. She's nominally a member of the German Christian Democrats, but, if you look at her policies, she went against her own College of Commissioners to push through these green regulations. But, in a way, we shouldn't blame the Greens. Of course, they're delighted that they can, that this is happening. Really at fault here are the centrist parties, the German Christian Democrats. They did not even manage to get a promise from von der Leyen to reverse the ban on the combustion engine. So the EU is banning the combustion engine by 2035, but that's really tomorrow in industry terms. And you would think, that would be the very minimum for the EPP and the German Christian Democrats to support her. She did not even promise that, despite the fact that at the moment we see that European manufacturers, car manufacturers, that they are not competitive when it comes to electric vehicles. Europe is being flooded by Chinese EVs, and the same European Union that is basically imposing electric vehicles by banning the combustion engine is now very close to imposing extra punitive tariffs on Chinese EV imports. And so even then, the EPP doesn't get it. I was even told that the French centre-right, the party of Michel Barnier, who is very hostile to von der Leyen, that in the end, they have supported her to keep EPP unity. So I think that's really the problem. Also, in Germany, you have the liberals in government. They could have, expressed a veto against the German government nominating von der Leyen in the first place. Once again, they went against their own voters by not putting this on the table.
OK, Peter, and what we've also seen is that despite the fact the right wing now make up 25% of the parliament in Brussels, they've been prevented from getting into positions of power as vice presidents and so on and so forth because, of course, the European Union does what it does and it protects itself and it freezes them out of power. Look, fascinating stuff. Thanks for joining us, Peter Clapp, the editor-in-chief of Brussels Report. Thanks for your company. There's lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including how and why London is currently facing an epidemic of crash for cash moped scams. Stay peeled. They're out to rip you off. But first, it's your headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
The headlines this hour and news just in. 5 Just Stop Oil protesters, including one of the co-founders of the group, have been jailed for conspiring to organise protests that blocked the M25 motorway, causing massive disruption for motorists back in 2022. Roger Hallam, Daniel Shaw, Louise Lancaster, Lucia Whitaker de Abreu and Cressida Gethin organised 45 protesters to climb onto the gantries over the motorway for 4 successive days in November 2022. Prosecutors alleged the protests cost the Metropolitan Police more than £1.1 million and caused more than 50,000 hours of vehicle delays for drivers. Hallam was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment, while the remaining 4 defendants were each handed 4 years imprisonment, respectively. Judge Christopher Hahir said the 5 had crossed the line from concerned campaigner to fanatic. Also in the headlines today, the COVID-19 inquiry was released this lunchtime, finding that successive governments had failed the public because of flawed policy and process in planning for the pandemic. The 240-page document revealed the government made serious errors and there were significant flaws in how the outbreak was dealt with. Sir Keir Starmer says he wants to use a summit of European leaders to push for joint action on illegal migration. The Prime Minister's hosting around 45 foreign leaders at Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire, where defence, security and energy are on the agenda. Earlier, he used his opening speech to reaffirm the UK's support for Ukraine, saying the threat from Russia reaches right across Europe. And in the United States, the former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is reportedly backing calls for President Biden to step aside in the presidential race. White House officials are now suggesting she's told Joe Biden he can't win the November the 5th election, echoing a growing number of Democrats who've raised serious concerns about the president's ability to defeat Donald Trump. It comes after the assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life and the revelation that Joe Biden has been diagnosed with coronavirus. And a man who was wrongly convicted of rape and spent 17 years in jail could have been exonerated almost a decade earlier, a review has found. In light of the findings, Andrew Malkinson says the Criminal Cases Review Commission obstructed his fight for justice and cost him an extra decade wrongly imprisoned. Those are the latest news headlines for now. I'm back in half an hour with more. See you then.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now, if you want to get in touch with us here at GB News, simply go to gbnews.com/your say. I'll read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. Hundreds and hundreds so far on the continued boats rolling up to Dover and the controversial involvement of a British vessel in a search and rescue mission deep into French waters last night. Stay tuned. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi again, here's your latest GB News weather forecast coming to you from the Met Office. Temperatures are going to be rising. Plenty of fine weather for many parts of the UK. However, in the northwest there will still be quite a bit of cloud as we go through the end of the week and further rain to come too. We currently have a weather system which is gradually making its way a little bit further eastwards, but this is going to break up as we go through the day. So a little bit less rain overnight, and any rain over Scotland likely to be confined just to the higher ground, and most other places turning dry. After a warm evening across England and Wales in particular, it is going to be a warm night. Not a huge amount of cloud around, but temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Some places staying with temperatures around 17 or 18 degrees. First thing tomorrow morning, there could be a few pockets of mist and fog around western parts of England and Wales perhaps, but for much of England and Wales it is going to be a fine start. Plenty of sunshine, and with that temperatures are going to start to rise pretty quickly. A cloudier story though across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Perhaps not as cloudy as today, but nonetheless a few spots of rain are possible as we go through the morning. Perhaps the brightest weather will be across more eastern parts of Scotland. A greater chance of seeing some sunshine here. Through the day we are going to see a bit more cloud building across far western parts of Scotland. In the Outer Hebrides, some rain pushing its way in here, and there could be some strong blustery winds to go with it. Elsewhere, and for Scotland, Northern Ireland, a drier day than today and a little bit brighter at times, but the best of the sunshine will be across much of England and Wales, and with that temperatures rising higher than today, highs of around 31 Celsius in the southeast, but everywhere it is going to feel relatively hot. As we go through the evening, we are going to see a bit more cloud and rain feeding into far northwestern parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but staying fine towards the southeast. There will be some wet weather pushing its way through as we go through Saturday and into Sunday, but Saturday could stay hot in the southeast. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. North Lanarkshire, the Bellshill bypass still closed both ways. That's the A725. Investigation work continues, so there's queues and no way through between the Shorehead flyover, that's the A8, and the M8 junction 7A turn-off. Between Glendovery and Berwyn train station, the A5 in Denbighshire in North Wales is closed east and westbound at the scene of a collision. Now, a few stretches of the A24 in Surrey remain closed off for resurfacing work, repairs and a spillage of diesel. So the northbound A24 shut between the Bear Green roundabout in Holmwood up toward the Deep Dean roundabout in Dorking. Also closed northbound from Pixham Lane in Dorking up towards the Givens Grove roundabout in Leatherhead. Southbound A24 shut from the Deep Dean roundabout heading down towards Flint Hill. That's causing queues. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 4:38. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, according to the non-profit organisation Insurance Fraud Bureau, London is currently facing an epidemic of so-called crash for cash scams. In these schemes, moped or motorcycle riders deliberately cause or stage accidents to fraudulently claim insurance from the targeted motorists. And joining me now to discuss this scandal is the motoring journalist Danny Caddy. Danny, great friend of the show. Danny, this sort of thing absolutely makes my blood boil. I see this sort of stuff all the time on social media. People jumping in front of cars. Now it's motorcyclists. Yep. And I've heard, Danny, in this case, particularly targeting vulnerable motorists, mothers and the elderly. Danny, tell us more.
Yeah, just when you thought it was the politicians at City Hall who were engaging in a war with motorists, it's actually thugs on two wheels, Martin, and the Metropolitan Police and the Insurance Fraud Bureau taken it incredibly seriously. But what you touch on is incredibly unfortunate, because these thugs, they prey on the vulnerable. So they won't necessarily, when they profile their targets, Martin, they won't necessarily profile and go for people like yourself and myself. They'll go for single women or maybe older people driving nice cars, and they know that they're going to have decent insurance policies behind them. And the way that it works, Martin, and again, prevalent really in London, not so prevalent in Birmingham and Manchester, mostly London. What they do, I hate driving in London, Martin, and what you do, you try and nudge out and you wait for a good Samaritan to let you out, and they hold up their side of the traffic. And at that very moment, when you are vulnerable, these lunatics just drive head onto you into the front of your car, normally at a very low speed. And what they do, Martin, they get themselves up off the floor, they clutch their neck, they look at their wrists, and they start taking photographs of the very minimal impact, the very minimal damage. But although it's physical damage to metal, which can be repaired, Martin, it's a psychological damage. Just imagine if you're a mum driving home with the kids on the school run, then all of a sudden some thug flies into you. And it costs tens of thousands of pounds sometimes, mate.
Now, in this particular story here, it was a mum on her own driving. The scooter went into a very low speed, ended up making thousands of pounds of insurance claims. And Danny, this sort of thing is on the rise. Apparently, there's been a 6,000% increase in the first half of last year. 30,000 incidents taking place like this every year. Danny, you know your onions. How do people stay safe? I'm assuming what everybody needs to be doing is just getting a good value for money dash cam.
You can get a dash cam for 20, 25 quid, Martin. And whilst I was researching this story, the insurers, they want you to invest in a dash cam because, again, when these lowlives profile the vulnerable, the needy, the single mum on the way back from school, if you've got a dash cam, they are less likely to ride into you. And that's what they do. And social media is littered with these incidents, Martin. If it wasn't so serious, it would be comedically farcical. It would be hysterical because it's just so obviously a scam. But the thing is, if you are nudging out and if you're in a car and you are on the wrong side of the road, then these will go for you. And it's part of a bigger criminal network. Whilst researching, the Metropolitan Police, they try and put people's doors through at 4 in the morning. But most of these lowlives have left the country. They're not even from the United Kingdom. And that's why it's making it so difficult for the Met and for the insurers. A dash cam is a great £25 investment, Martin.
Yeah, you get them on Amazon, all sorts of places. Easy, just pop them on your windshield, switch them on, it connects to your phone, and that evidence, Danny, can keep you safe and save you thousands in the courts and on your insurance. Protect your no-claims bonus. Danny Kelly, always a pleasure to have him on the show.
Thank you.
And never a chore. Take care. Now, still plenty of time to grab your chance to win £30,000 in the Great British Giveaway. It's our biggest cash prize of the year, and it's totally tax-free. Now, what would you do with all that extra dough? Well, here's how you could win the lot.
£30,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours. It's our biggest cash prize of the year so far, and you could be getting that winning call from us to tell you that you're our next Great British Giveaway winner.
Oh, I can't believe this.
Oh my God, this is amazing.
That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon.
I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh, you shocked me. I never won a penny in my life.
If I was there, I'd buy you a drink.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Fill your boots. Now, don't go anywhere, because up next we'll cross live to Milwaukee ahead of Donald Trump's acceptance speech as he becomes the official Republican presidential nominee. Hulk Hogan's there, and so's Nigel Farage. So's our man Ray Addison. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
An employment tribunal has found that a senior lawyer telling a legal secretary that she looked nice created an intimidating environment and made her feel violated.
Well, she's won her sexual harassment suit, so is saying someone looks nice acceptable in the workplace anymore?
Well, joining us now to debate this is political commentator Christine Hamilton, who thinks it should be, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid, who thinks making comments like these are unnecessary. OK, Rebecca, why is it unnecessary to tell your colleague they look nice?
Well, how somebody looks at work shouldn't be particularly important or relevant. But I think my issue here is that it's used as a sort of dismissive way to make women feel silly for complaining about things. Like, oh, it's just saying you look nice. Why does it matter? But we all know there are different ways of saying things. And if you are an older man in a position of power, looking a woman up and down and saying, oh, you look nice, in a lascivious tone, which, as far as we know, is quite possibly what happened, that's not acceptable. That's not workplace appropriate, and it would make somebody feel uncomfortable.
Christine, she's right, Rebecca, isn't she? It depends how it's said. If you've got someone who's sleazy saying, oh, you look nice, you're going to be a bit off-put, aren't you?
Yes, we don't know whether this was said in a lascivious tone or not. And as far as I can see, this particular case, the boss went too far and he did a lot of other things as well. But what worries me is that the tribunal has ruled that just saying you look nice could be included as sexual harassment. Now, I think that is ridiculous.
Realistically, women don't make these accusations for fun. Women don't make these accusations to be difficult. They do it because they've been made to feel unsafe or unable to work in a certain place.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said stump.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere. Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:47. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Tonight, Donald Trump is expected to speak for the first time since he was shot at a rally as he accepts the official Republican nomination for presidency. Trump plans to build on his running mate J.D. Vance's vow to champion the forgotten Americans, with the central theme being to kickstart a golden age and to make America great once again. Well, let's cross the pond now and go to Ray Addison, our man who's in Milwaukee outside that venue. Ray, Donald Trump you're inside the venue now. Donald Trump set to appear on that stage in a few hours' time. What's the mood on the ground? It seems like only 5 days ago they tried to assassinate Donald Trump. Now it simply feels like Team Trump is unstoppable.
Well, a real sense of anticipation and nervousness, as I think you would expect. You can see behind me there on the stage the rehearsals which are taking place. A range of speakers, but obviously Donald Trump making that keynote speech at the end of the evening where he will formally accept the Republican Party's nomination to be their candidate for this election. So what are we expecting to hear from Donald Trump tonight? Well, presumably we may well get his take on exactly what happened in Pennsylvania around 5 days ago now when he was shot by that would-be assassin's bullet, the impact that it's had on him, along with the usual criticism that we've seen from many of former President Trump's rallies where he's criticised President Biden's handling of illegal immigration in the country and the US economy as well. Now, despite that, Donald Trump has indicated since that attack in Pennsylvania that he very much wants to unite America. So it will be interesting to see what kind of tone he takes with that, whether he can achieve that. Is it going to be statesman-like, or will it be showman-like, that showman who has divided so much of the US population? So I spoke to people earlier here at the convention and asked them what they were hoping to hear.
What he wants to do to make America great again, you know. I do think after this assassination attempt that he's going to try to be a little more unifying.
It's called veritatis splendor in Latin, the splendor of truth.
Yes.
Hoorah!
We're going to get some truth from him.
These lying punks
I'm really hoping that he reaches out across the aisle and talks to everybody.
Look, I'm super pumped. I can't wait to hear his speech, and I think it'll be even more emotional.
Well, it'd be interesting to see also if Donald Trump responds to comments made today by Russia's foreign ministry. We know throughout this presidential campaign that he has promised to end the Ukraine war within 24 hours of getting elected before he even takes office, if he were to take office next year. But Moscow is describing that pledge as pre-election rhetoric, and they're saying that he'd also promised to achieve a Middle East peace breakthrough, and they say that he failed to do that during his presidency. Meanwhile, President Biden having another bad day in a series of bad days which seem to have been going on for several weeks now. We're seeing reporting from senior White House officials that they believe that former Speaker Nancy Pelosi has now told President Biden that she believes he cannot win this election, and she's now supporting calls, we understand, for him to drop out. And I think we can expect to see a number of other senior Democrats making that same call throughout this day, building up to that big speech by Donald Trump. And that is, of course, a real blow for Joe Biden. We know that he's recently been diagnosed with COVID. He cancelled a speech that he was supposed to be giving in Las Vegas. And while Joe Biden is presenting an image of weakness, it could be argued, President Trump continues to present strength.
And tonight in that arena there, Ray, we have some other guests. Hulk Hogan, the wrestler, is going to do a turn. Kid Rock, and of course our own Nigel Farage. He'll be presenting his show on GB News live tonight from America. Is there any chance, do you think, Ray, of Nigel Farage grabbing a quick chat with his old mate Donald Trump?
Well, I think if Nigel Farage has shown anything over the last few years, never say never when it comes to what he could potentially achieve. I mentioned Trump will be going for that statesman-like approach, potentially, rather than the showman. Maybe he's leaving that show element of it to those additional speakers. As you said, we've got Hulk Hogan, we've got the always controversial Tucker Carlson, formerly of Fox News, as well. And then, of course, in very true Donald Trump style, he's going to be introduced by the CEO of the UFC, Dana White, as well. And so that is going to be one heck of a moment.
Super stuff, Ray Allison. We'll make sure we come back to you in the next hour. In the build-up to that massively anticipated first speech by Donald Trump only 5 days ago, an attempted assassination on his life today. He'll be back on that stage, and we'll make sure we bring you all the latest on that event throughout the show and beyond. Now, loads of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts throughout the show, and the one topic that's really got you going is border control or lack of. We showed you exclusive pictures at the top of the show of boats rolling into Dover, 315 arrivals today alone. And also we showed you exclusive footage of a search and rescue mission happening deep in French waters by a British vessel. This is what you've got to say. Grumpy Grandad says every country in the world has the right to defend its own borders. If they wanted to stop it, they could. They just don't want to stop it. And I think Sir Keir Starmer's meeting with the European Union today will confirm that in some way. Babs, however, has a very different take on that search and rescue mission. She says, we helped in French waters yesterday, taking migrants back to France after the vessel deflated. We should help more often. Prevention is better than cure. Mandy is raging about the human rights lawyers who seem to frustrate efforts to control our borders all along, saying we need a super lawyer to take on the human rights lawyers. Why can't we have a lawyer to represent the human rights of British people against all of the people arriving here illegally? Come on, where is that lawyer? And GB News viewer Dave as this. We do have boats going to Calais. They're called ferries. Let's get the illegals on the ferries and let the French customs sort them out. Now, don't go anywhere, because we'll be discussing the huge news that 15,000 small boat migrants have crossed the English Channel so far this year alone, whilst the Home Secretary looks to give amnesty to 90,000 migrants who had been earmarked for Rwanda flights. It seems we've gone from just stop the Rwanda programme to rolling out the red carpet. I'm Martin Daubney, GB News. Now it's your weather with Alex Burkill.
inside. From boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi again, here's your latest GB News weather forecast coming to you from the Met Office. Temperatures are going to be rising. Plenty of fine weather for many parts of the UK. However, in the northwest there will still be quite a bit of cloud as we go through the end of the week and further rain to come too. We currently have a weather system which is gradually making its way a little bit further eastwards, but this is going to break up as we go through the day. So a little bit less rain overnight, and any rain over Scotland likely to be confined just to the higher ground, and most other places turning dry. After a warm evening across England and Wales in particular, it is going to be a warm night. Not a huge amount of cloud around, but temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Some places staying with temperatures around 17 or 18 degrees. First thing tomorrow morning, there could be a few pockets of mist and fog around western parts of England and Wales perhaps, but for much of England and Wales it is going to be a fine start. Plenty of sunshine, and with that temperatures are going to start to rise pretty quickly. A cloudier story though across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Perhaps not as cloudy as today, but nonetheless a few spots of rain are possible as we go through the morning. Perhaps the brightest weather will be across more eastern parts of Scotland. A greater chance of seeing some sunshine here. Through the day we are going to see a bit more cloud building across far western parts of Scotland. In the Outer Hebrides, some rain pushing its way in here, and there could be some strong blustery winds to go with it. Elsewhere, and for Scotland, Northern Ireland, a drier day than today and a little bit brighter at times, but the best of the sunshine will be across much of England and Wales, and with that temperatures rising higher than today, highs of around 31 Celsius in the southeast, but everywhere it is going to feel relatively hot. As we go through the evening, we are going to see a bit more cloud and rain feeding into far northwestern parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but staying fine towards the southeast. There will be some wet weather pushing its way through as we go through Saturday and into Sunday, but Saturday could stay hot in the southeast. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Northbound M6 at junction 26, the Orrell interchange. Now the entry slip road there is closed off. A vehicle undergoing a tyre change is causing queues. Whitchurch in Shropshire, just on the English side of the Welsh-English border. At the Whitchurch bypass there, the A41 closed both ways. There's investigation work underway from a previous bump, so no way through between the A49 at the Chester Road roundabout and the A525 at the Whitchurch Services roundabout. And delays through Dorking in Surrey and in Holmwood. A few stretches of the A24 remain closed off. Southbound shut from the Deepdene roundabout down towards Flint Hill. On the northbound side, the A24 closed from the Bear Green roundabout up towards the Deepdene roundabout in Dorking, and it's shut northbound too from Pixham Lane in Dorking up towards the Givens Grove roundabout, and it's queuing. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
£30,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours. It's our biggest cash prize of the year so far, and you could be getting that winning call from us to tell you that you're our next Great British Giveaway winner.
Oh, I can't believe this.
Oh my God, this is amazing.
That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon.
I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh, you shocked me. I never won a penny in my life.
If I was there, I'd buy you a drink.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets, and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Go and get another glass of that bubbly, you've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, GB News can exclusively reveal that more than 15,000 small boat migrants have crossed the English Channel so far this year alone. And a further 315 illegals arrived today, just hours after one died and 72 were rescued after their boats began deflating off the French coast near Calais. We've got exclusive footage of the arrivals and of that search and rescue mission. And meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer has rolled out the red carpet to 50 leaders from the European political community at Blenheim Palace today. With talks of a reset with Brussels, will Mr Starmer, who campaigned to cancel Brexit, if you recall, show his true colours now he's Prime Minister? We'll also have a press conference shortly from Blenheim Palace. And European Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen was controversially re-elected as president today, but at what cost? With yet more punitive Green Deals in store and no guarantees on border control, what will this mean for Britain? I'll speak to a Swedish MEP who voted against von der Leyen shortly. That's all coming up in your next hour. So shortly we'll be crossing to a press conference with Sir Keir Starmer from Blenheim Palace. 50 European Union top brass rocked up to the palace today. Talks of a reset with the European Union. Top of the agenda, of course, is immigration, illegal immigration. Emmanuel Macron said there was no silver bullet. We can say that again, because today alone, 315 illegals rocked up to the shores of Dover, taking the total to 15,000 so far this year. And when you think about that, think about it, 15,000 yesterday were revealed on GB News, and there's live pictures there of that press conference. We're waiting to go to that with Sir Keir Starmer expected to speak. Think about it, 15,000 this year alone. Can we ever stop the boats? I want to hear from you. Send your views and post your comments by going to gbnews.com/YourSaver. Now let's get your headlines, and it's Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you and good evening to you. Well, the top story from the GB newsroom right now is that 5 Just Stop Oil protesters, including one of its co-founders, were jailed today for conspiring to organise protests that blocked the M25 motorway, causing massive disruption for motorists back in 2022. Roger Hallam, Daniel Shaw, Louise Lancaster, Lucia Whitaker de Abreu and Cressida Gethin organised 45 protesters to climb onto gantries over the motorway for 4 successive days in November 2022. Prosecutors allege the protests cost the Metropolitan Police more than £1 million and caused more than 50,000 hours of vehicle delays for drivers. Roger Hallam was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment. The remaining 4 defendants were each handed 4 years. The judge in the case said the 5 had crossed the line from concerned campaigner to fanatic. Well, Sir Keir Starmer has called today's COVID inquiry report, has said that it confirms that the UK was unprepared for the coronavirus outbreak. The 240-page assessment by Baroness Hallett found there were significant and widespread failures by successive governments. The report also condemns the 2011 pandemic strategy for being virtually abandoned when COVID hit, with no forward focus on economic and social impacts thereafter. 10 recommendations were made, including a more streamlined approach to dealing with health emergencies and conducting UK-wide pandemic exercises every 3 years. The Prime Minister says his government is committed to learning from the inquiry and expressed his heartfelt sympathies to those who'd lost loved ones during the pandemic. Well, Sir Keir Starmer is hosting that summit at Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire, which he hopes will fire the starting gun, he says, on a new relationship with the EU. The Prime Minister says he wants to reset our relationship and push for closer security with our new near neighbours. The group have agreed on boosting defence capabilities for Ukraine as it defends itself against Russia. Sir Keir Starmer referencing the qualities of the former Prime Minister Winston Churchill in his opening speech.
We stand for the values that he embodies around the world. Liberty and democracy, yes, of course, but also defiance and resolve in their defence. And today, as a new storm gathers over our continent, we choose to meet it in that same spirit. We want to work with all of you to reset relationships, rediscover our common interest, and renew the bonds of trust and friendship that brighten the fabric of European life.
Prime Minister speaking a short time ago. Well, Volodymyr Zelensky is one of those 40 European leaders meeting in Oxfordshire today. All those leaders being encouraged to offer more support for his country, Ukraine. Well, the President says he's counting now on Sir Keir Starmer's support.
The UK demonstrated leadership from the very beginning of Russian attacks, and all the strong steps and some not simple steps always UK began. So I count on my meeting. I will have meeting with Prime Minister and also bilateral one, and also I will have meeting with the government.
Volodymyr Zelensky, well, as Martin said earlier, we are expecting Sir Keir Starmer to speak shortly. As soon as that begins, we will go to it. But in the meantime, let me tell you what's happening in the United States, where the former House Speaker has reportedly backed calls for President Biden to step aside in the presidential race, just as his staff tell the world he now has COVID. White House officials suggest that Nancy Pelosi has personally told Joe Biden he can't win the election in November, echoing the thoughts of a growing number of Democrats who've raised serious concerns about the president's ability to defeat Donald Trump. And, of course, that comes after that assassination attempt on Trump at the weekend, which had initially seemed to reduce pressure on Joe Biden to withdraw. The White House and Pelosi's comments haven't been commented upon, but Democrats are reportedly planning a shift in their 2024 campaign strategy as Joe Biden has been forced to pull out of a campaign speech after confirmation he's gone down with coronavirus.
I made a serious mistake in the whole debate. And look, when I originally ran, you may remember it, I said I was going to be a transitional candidate. And I thought that I'd be able to move from this, just pass it on to someone else. But I didn't anticipate things getting so divided. And quite frankly, I think the only thing age brings is a little bit of wisdom. And I think I've demonstrated that I know how to get things done for the country.
Just a quick word about the heat for you now. If you're in the east or the south of England, a heat health alert has been issued for large parts of the country. Temperatures set to hit 30 degrees Celsius tomorrow. It sounds nice, but it can be quite dangerous. The UK Health Security Agency alerts cover the East Midlands, Eastern England, London and the South East from tomorrow right the way through to Saturday. It's advising people to keep their homes cool by closing blinds and curtains, drinking plenty of fluids, avoiding strenuous exercise and checking in on vulnerable neighbours. Those are the latest news headlines for now. I'm Polly Middlehurst. I'm back in half an hour. See you then.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Polly. Now, as Polly indicated, we are about to cross to Blenheim Palace. Sir Keir Starmer is about to address the nation after that conference of 50 European leaders who are currently in Britain They are discussing closer ties, it looks like. Is this a rowing back on Brexit? Is this Sir Keir Starmer getting closer to the European Union? You can see the stage there. Sir Keir Starmer is due out very shortly. Emmanuel Macron said earlier today, there is no silver bullet to stop the boats. Well, you can say that again, Monsieur Macron, because today alone, 315 illegal immigrants rocked up to British shores aboard boats. We showed you exclusive footage on GB News. Last night, we also saw a search and rescue mission deep into French waters. Border Force Defender, a British vessel, went one of the crafts in the sea, a dinghy, got into trouble. It was deflating. Sadly, one person on that boat perished, and 71 others were rounded up and took back to Calais by a British vessel. Today's conference was set up by Rishi Sunak. This wasn't Sir Keir Starmer's idea, but of course, Sir Keir Starmer, he's known for his previous penchant for wanting to cancel Brexit. Are we about to see Sir Keir Starmer make a dramatic announcement? We'll cross that when it happens. So moving on now. More than 15,000 small boat migrants have crossed the English Channel so far this year, GB News can exclusively reveal. The figure was reached after a further 315 migrants made that illegal journey today alone. And it follows another tragedy, as I just said, in the Channel just hours earlier, yesterday evening, when one migrant drowned and another 71 were rescued after their boats began deflating off the French coast near Calais. And I can now show you exclusive footage of that incident. If you see on your screen now, we can see a British boat. There it is, Border Force Ranger, left Ramsgate there. It goes out into French waters. It pauses for some time, around about half an hour. This is about 7 o'clock yesterday evening. It was getting to that craft that was in peril, that was deflating. One person tragically perished in the Channel. 71 others were rounded up and then taken, as you can see now, Border Force Ranger moving towards Calais. This is a British vessel performing a search and rescue mission taking back to France. So you might well say, why are British vessels getting involved in that? Others have said, well, of course they should. This is a humanitarian mission. And it's also been reported that up to 90,000 migrants who were set for deportation to Rwanda are to be fast-tracked to claim asylum under the new Labour government. Immigration caseworkers could soon begin processing claims of people threatened for removal to the East African country when the Home Secretary introduces this new legislation. Well, let's now speak to political commentator Stephen Carlton-Wood. Stephen, welcome to the show. So we've gone from Rwanda, it would seem, to rolling out the red carpet. The Refugee Council today stated it expects 60,000 of the 90,000 earmarked for deportation will now successfully claim asylum and have the right to remain in the United Kingdom. Stephen, what message does that send out to the people smugglers?
Well, it's saying we're open for business and come and join us any time, really. That's the big message from it. But what you've just said there about in the system already, we've got 90,000 people in the system. And it's the Refugees Council that reckon that 2/3 of them will be granted asylum. So it means that even if you break the law and you come here as an illegal immigrant, we're going to give you a pat on the back and say, yes, come in. And I just think that is the wrong message completely to be sending out. I mean, this is a knock-on effect, really, when you think about it, from the Blair days where we had open borders. So when we had the Conservative government trying to achieve something by coming up with the Rwanda plan, if it was good or bad, and they invested a considerable amount of money into this, where you've got Yvette Cooper now saying, oh, well, we're going to start saving money straight away. Hang on a minute, we've lost millions now with the deal that we're going to get to Rwanda. And we're under no obligation to get a penny of that money back. Us as a nation now are reneging on the deal that we've done with Rwanda. So if Yvette Cooper thinks that they're going to hand over millions of pounds, I can't see that happening.
And with 60,000 people, just from this tranche of people alone, Stephen, now automatically, if they get that asylum, entitled to social housing, to benefits, to NHS treatment, the right to work. They are literally coming to this country illegally, and they are literally being given the full rights of citizenship. And yet, Stephen, we can see on our screens now pictures from Blenheim Palace at the European political community. Sir Keir Starmer has got 50 European leaders, the top brass, including European Union top brass, over to Britain, looking to them for assistance in somehow trying to end this. But, Stephen, we announced yesterday, exclusively on GB News, astonishing figures of 1.265 million illegal immigrants arriving in 27 EU member states last year alone. Stephen, if the European Union cannot even control their own borders, how on earth can we turn to them for assistance to keep illegals out of our country?
Well, absolutely. And then they're still trying to dictate to us who we should be taking on. And I think this idea that Sir Keir come up with this morning about doing a deal that they can take some back and we will take on legitimate asylum seekers, I think that's a ludicrous idea again, because where do you draw the line there? And the saddest thing about all this is there's genuine people in the world that do need to come to this country for asylum. And that means that we can't help them as well as we might do because of these illegal people raiding our shores, basically. And also the other knock-on effect to that is the infrastructure, our infrastructure, where you put a lot of people in one area where the hospitals are struggling. You've got the dentists. I mean, you try and get a dentist appointment now, and it's nearly impossible. So we're at bursting point as it is with the people who currently live in this country, and to take endless amounts of people without any plans to accommodate for all this, it's an impossible situation, and it's just going to get worse and worse under this Labour government.
And Stephen Carlton was Sir Keir Starmer, David Lammy, Nick Thomas-Symonds, the new Commissioner, the Minister for European Relations. They've all repeatedly said that the Labour Party has no intention of reversing Brexit, no intention of a second referendum. And of course, this convention, we can see on our screens now, the European Political Community Convention at Blenheim Palace, that was set up by Rishi Sunak. That was a pre-booked, diarised event. This isn't Sir Keir Starmer organising this, and that makes you wonder why on earth did Rishi Sunak call the election early? It could have been him on this stage today. That's a separate issue. But do you think that actually Sir Keir Starmer, who campaigned for so long to reverse Brexit, and he said he sees his natural spiritual homeland as Brussels, not Britain, do you think that these kind of events, while we might not see a formal realignment, we might see political deals done in the background, piecemeal deals on immigration, on energy, on who knows what? Do you think we are seeing today the beginnings, Stephen, of a manoeuvre, of a much closer alignment in a way that people never voted for when they voted for Brexit in 2016?
Yes, well, absolutely. If you look at Sir Keir's clip that you were playing earlier on, all the language in that was geared up to our friendship with Europe and reacting closer with Europe and forging closer links and working together. All the language was there in that statement that he made earlier on. The alarm bells are ringing for everyone now, and a lot of people are going to be wondering why they voted the way they did.
And do you think that these kind of deals with piecemeal deals with countries, we saw Rishi Sunak, when he was still the Prime Minister, cozying up to Giorgia Meloni. Meloni has now got a lot more power in the European Union. She's forged herself to be the centre, heart of the right in Brussels. Now, Sir Keir Starmer is having meetings with Giorgia Meloni. But you look at these figures here, Stephen. Italy had 676,000 illegal immigrants arrive on its shores in 9 years, 2012 to 2023, 11 years. A total inability to control its own borders. The same with France, 1.2 million. Hungary, 1.25 million. 750,000 going to Spain. 2.15 million going to Germany. 1.8 million going to Greece. And these are just the illegals. These aren't the total asylum seekers. And do you fear, Stephen, that any kind of deal with the European Union, with all these presidents, with all these prime ministers, it would mean inevitably having to take our fair share of those massive numbers?
Well, this is why it's so important not to forge closer links with Europe, because we can't take on their problem. We've got our own problem, and they're really fueling the problem from not containing it themselves. And then quite freely, this is why we're not seeing the French trying to stop them crossing the channel, really. you was going on before at the start of the programme about one of our boats going over to France to drop them off. I remember earlier on in the year we had a boat go out to a mile off the coast of France and then bring them all the way back to the UK. At least yesterday they actually sent them back to Calais. But we can't really be cooperating with Europe agreeing to take any more people. The illegal migrations have to stop, and Europe have to work together and stop that. And they've got to come up with some tremendous plan.
Now, Stephen Colson, some people might say we should be forging closer alliances. We could only solve this problem by working together. And then others might rightly turn around and say, well, if they can't control their own borders, and if their own voters are telling them, as we saw in France, as we saw in Italy, that they need to get a grip, why on earth are they suddenly going to help people hurry through, keep them in their country rather than hurrying through to Britain? Stephen Colson Woods, thank you very much for your time on the show. And you can still see on your screen there live shots where the Prime Minister will be speaking shortly as he hosts the European Political Community Summit. That's Blenheim Palace. We'll cut back to that when the Prime Minister emerges.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said, Stump, you made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Now, the last time we spoke, we always talk about the topic of gender and your transition. So talk to me about now, though. What you have done is you've created a comic book about your life and about your transition to tell us things that perhaps the press and media don't talk about.
Yes, so throughout the years I have always been persuaded to write a book, but I was never ready to disclose so much. And I've been working this beautiful comic book. I brought you a little copy. It's here. You can have a look into it later, where I'm detailing past experiences, growing up in Brazil and then moving to this country, and my struggles, the struggles that I had to go through to become the woman that I'm today. I'm a woman. I'm not a biological woman, but I am a woman. I just cannot have babies because I don't have the female organs, but I'm a woman inside out, therefore I use the female toilet. But what has been going on around, there are a lot of people, they regard themselves as being transgender when they're actually not. They don't have any psychological help, they don't have any medical help. They just wear female clothes and makeup and they call themselves female. And they're the ones using female spaces and take advantage of that. And that is what should stop and be controlled.
But that's the problem, isn't it? So what do you do to stop that? I mean, the suggestion was a third extra space. How would you feel about a third extra space where, you know, this is where if somebody is trans or any of those other things can use rather than using the female toilet?
I don't think that would work, actually, because these people that those people that regard themselves as being females in their minds, they still would use the female toilet.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, and you can see live shots on your screens now where the Prime Minister will be speaking shortly as he hosts the European Political Community Summit at Blenheim Palace. We'll cut back to that as the Prime Minister emerges. Now, moving on, Ursula von der Leyen won support from European Union lawmakers for another 5-year term earlier today as President of the European Commission, the EU's powerful executive body. The 720... OK, we know we have to cut back now to Sir Keir Starmer, who's speaking at Blenheim Palace.
Bringing together 46 European leaders, including President Zelensky, who addressed the plenary this morning, as I think you know. We discussed once again our commitment to stand with Ukraine, a very important commitment made again today, including supporting their energy needs ahead of winter, so getting ahead of this winter, and cracking down on the ships that are helping Russia to evade sanctions. Now, we need to be clear, Ukraine is fighting not just for the Ukrainian people, though of course it is, but for the European people, for freedom, democracy and the rule of law. And our security, therefore, starts in Ukraine. So we pledge to President Zelensky once again that we will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. We also had a productive discussion on wider European security, defending our democracies against Russian interference and supporting countries like Moldova, who are dealing with more direct threats. It's not just a good idea to work with our partners, it's essential. And I said on the steps of Downing Street that I would govern for the whole country, including those who didn't vote for us. And I meant it. We can only make progress on the issues that so many people care about, like illegal migration and national security, if we have the maturity and leadership to reach out a hand to our European friends. And I want to congratulate Ursula von der Leyen for her re-election today as President of the European Commission. So we are going to deepen our cooperation on defence and security, and on illegal migration, where we are resetting our approach, and that's been central today. We are going to smash the gangs, break their business model, and secure our borders. And we'll do this not by committing taxpayer money to gimmicks, but with practical solutions that are in line with international law. As Director of Public Prosecutions, I saw the work that can be done across borders to bring terrorists to justice and break up their networks. And I simply do not accept that we can't do the same with organised migration crime. And we started that work here today. We're increasing the UK presence at Europol in The Hague to play our full part in the European Migrant Smuggling Centre. We've agreed new cooperation arrangements with partners like Slovenia and Slovakia to disrupt organised crime, and with our new Border Security Command. We are going to work with our European partners to share intelligence, data, expertise, and put the gangs out of business. But to stop illegal migration, we must also tackle it at source. So today I'm announcing £84 million of new funding for projects across Africa and the Middle East. That includes humanitarian and health support, skills training, help with job opportunities, and access to education. This is a vital part of gripping the migration crisis. And it shows how we're going to do business on the world stage. We are facing up to the huge problems beyond our shores, because these problems echo at home. The effects play out on our streets. And in a dangerous world, we serve no one and solve nothing by turning inward. We have to step forward and lead. And that's what we're doing. That's what we've shown here today, because it's the best way to uphold our values and keep our people safe. So I'm proud to leave this summit with stronger relationships across Europe, and to leave the EPC in a stronger position as well, with a clear agenda for the coming months and the next summit confirmed in Hungary this year and Albania and Denmark in 2025. Thank you very much, and I'll now take a number of questions from the media, starting, I think, with Nick from the BBC. Nick.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thanks very much. Thank you, Prime Minister. President Macron said this morning that there's no silver bullet when it comes to solving the issue of small boats crossing the Channel. He's right, isn't he? Despite all the warm words today, it's going to be very difficult to deliver tangible progress on that. And if I may just quickly on Ukraine, is there anything extra that you as Prime Minister are offering President Zelensky when it comes to weapons or to money, or are you open to it?
Well, let me take both of them. Look, there's no easy silver bullet. If there was, it had been fired a long time ago. It's difficult, it's hard, it's challenging. But I'm absolutely convinced it's a very serious problem and it requires a very serious response. And that's why we have put to one side the gimmick of Rwanda and are pursuing the serious response, which is to smash the gangs that are running this vile trade. And I've said it before, but I say it again. I have seen this, I have been in the room when operations have been conducted to take down terrorist gangs, sharing data, intelligence, thinking strategy, including where you're going to prosecute, which has to be the first decision, not the last decision, to take those gangs down. And I'm convinced it can be done. But what happened today, which was really important, because this is the first time that the EPC has actually discussed this as a primary issue. And so that's really important. And the consensus, not just at the plenary, but particularly in the workshop, is that the focus needs to be on the gangs if we're going to smash. And that was a really important moment, I think, for us all. There's a high degree of consensus that we need to work in this way, a real interest in working with our Border Security Command, and a sense of how quickly we can get on with that. There are no silver bullets. Nothing is going to solve this overnight. And as I made clear in my opening plenary, we also have to tackle the problem upstream in relation to the drivers of migration, whether that's climate, whether that's poverty, or whether that's conflict. And that's why it's really important that I've set out the money that we've pledged to that here today. But I can tell you there was a real consensus that this is the serious response to a serious problem. Thank you. I'm sorry, on Ukraine, just in relation to the capability, look, there's no change in position. There's no new decisions that we've taken as a government that weren't taken by the government of 2 weeks ago. But the support for Ukraine is as strong as it was, and obviously stronger by having had 46 European leaders here today. That's on top of the NATO Council we had last week recommitting. And so that commitment is there, but there's no new decision or change of position in relation to the use of the capabilities that we're providing. Thank you, Nick. I'll go to Robert at ITV.
ITV. Prime Minister, I think I'm going to say something that's a statement of the blooming obvious, which is that the arms manufacturing and defence capability of Europe and the UK on their own is completely inadequate to support Ukraine without America's help. So if America were to decide to seek a peace treaty of some sort with Putin, there's pretty much nothing we can do about that. And then on asylum seekers crossing the Channel, unless and until you get these intelligence sharing, policing agreements across Europe, are you simply reconciled to the numbers crossing the Channel rising?
Let me deal, in relation to the first point, Robert, one of the things that came out of today, and in fact the discussions we had in Washington last week, was this commitment to an industrial strategy sitting behind the pure capability question, for the very reason that you pose, which is the backfill, the capability when it comes to that. So that industrial strategy was much discussed last week, and that discussion has carried on today. I'm not going to preempt what may or may not happen later this year in relation to the election in America, but I can't underscore enough the shared commitment here today at the EPC, hosted by us, the UK, and I'm really proud of the role that we've played in relation to Ukraine. It has been a leading role, and that is credit to the last government, which we united with on this and have continued that work. But I'm not going to preempt what may happen in the elections later this year, other than to say that industrial strategy, I think, is a very important component of the package that we need to put together. In relation to what's happening in relation to the Channel, no, I'm not resigned to anything. The work that we can do starts straight away. We've started on the command, but there's other things we can do, sharing our intelligence and data. That's why we've put more resource into Europol already. When I was leader of the opposition, went to The Hague to have discussions with Europol to get ahead of this, essentially to say what can we do early on to increase capacity to work in a different way with Europol. And of course, we need to get on with the measures that we can do here in this country. And, you know, the tragedy of all this is not just in the numbers that have crossed, but of course, the poor souls who have been lost in the last week, 1 last night, 4, I think, in the last 7 days or so, which is a reminder of the human cost of the vile trade that these gangs are perpetuating, and that is why we must take them down. Thank you, Robert. Beth.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Beth Rigby, Sky News. Prime Minister, over 550 people have arrived on small boats since you became Prime Minister just 2 weeks ago. You know this is a hard nut to crack. If the prisons crisis is, in your words, shocking, what is the small boats crisis? And when do you expect to make progress that the public can actually measure you on? And if I may, Donald Trump's running mate, DJ Vance, is a vocal critic of aid to Ukraine. Are you worried about that? And how does it affect your roadmap to spending 2.5% of GDP on defence? Thank you.
Thanks. But I think that's 3 questions packed into one. Two. But look, on the numbers and what's happened in relation to small boats crossing, we're inheriting a really bad problem here from the government, who has not addressed this. Nobody is suggesting it's easy. It is a test of government, and it was a test of us as the opposition before we came into government. But we've wasted time here. We've wasted resource. We've had a Home Office that has been dedicated to a gimmick that didn't work. And therefore, the work that could have been done in relation to border security hasn't been done, in my view, in the way it should have been done. And the proof is in the pudding. We've got record numbers this year. We can't switch that in 24 hours, in 1 week. 2 weeks ago today, we were still knocking on doors asking people to vote for us. We can't turn it around that quickly. But the frustration that I have in relation to prisons is across this as well, because so much time and effort has been spent on Rwanda, a scheme which, in my view, was never going to work, and the proof is that it hasn't worked, when the serious answers have been left unaddressed, which is why I'm pleased now that we're getting on at speed. I'm really pleased that the Home Secretary made an announcement in relation to the Border Security Command so quickly, and here we are, 2 weeks, 14 days after we were knocking on doors, hosting the EPC, where the focus is on how we work together with our colleagues across Europe to do the coordinated work that we need to do. So I'm pleased that we're making up ground. We will continue to do it at pace, but we've been left in a really difficult position yet again by this government, which has it's been a dereliction of duty, because border control is about our national security. And rather than address it with a serious answer, they addressed it with a gimmick. The gimmick didn't work, and we're left with a very serious situation to try and turn around. And in relation to the situation in America, look, we'll have to, those elections will take place. It will be for the American people to decide who they want to elect into office, and we will work with whoever's elected into office, as you would expect. That is what I mean about sort of maturity and leadership, not just within Europe, but more widely, and of course with the US. And the special relationship that is there between the US and the UK was forged in the most difficult of circumstances. It's endured a very long time, and we are committed to it. I discussed that. I've expressed my commitment to President Biden. I spoke to President Trump on Sunday evening after the assassination attempt, where, again, the special relationship featured in our discussion. Thank you, Beth. I've got Kieran, I think, from The Guardian. Kieran.
Thank you. Kieran Stacey from The Guardian. You spoke today to the Albanian Prime Minister about their deal with Italy to process asylum claims on Italy's behalf. Could such an offshore processing deal work for the UK?
Well, I've always said I'll look at what works, but the focus today has predominantly been about the work we need to do on taking down the gangs. And obviously, Albania and Italy co-chaired the working group on migration today, and that was predominantly and dominated by the work that we need to do, sharing intelligence, taking down the gangs, and this sense that the focus has to be on that aspect if we're going to make progress. And the sense actually out of the group that this is not a left-right divide, it's actually a really important pragmatic set of arrangements that we need to put in place with our European partners. And I felt there was a real sense of progress over the course of the day in relation to those discussions. Thank you, Kieran. I've got David from the Daily Mail. David.
Thanks, Prime Minister. You didn't seem to categorically rule out there the prospect of offshore processing centres in the future. Can you categorically rule it out as part of your solution in the future? And during your bilat with President Macron later, will you discuss the possibility of a returns deal, and what might that look like? Would it be just a bilateral deal with France, or would it be with the whole EU, and would you be willing to accept a share of migrants being sent here by the EU as part of any deal?
Well, look, in relation to the agreement between Albania and Italy, obviously there's interest in how that might work, but that wasn't actually the central discussion in the task force, in the round table that we had. It was about the practical measures that we want to discuss, which is about how we deal with taking the gangs down in the first place. But look, I'm a practical person. I'm a pragmatist, and I've always said we'll look at what works, and where cases can be processed closer to origin, then that is something which, of course, ought to be looked at. But I mean, the reason I'm putting it in this way is because the emphasis today was very much on the practicalities of dealing with the gangs in the first place. And that's where the second part of your question is answered as well. The returns agreement only comes into being at the end of the process. And my focus is at the beginning of the process to make sure we actually secure our borders, because the problem we've got at the moment is we've got tens of thousands of people who are here, who shouldn't be here, who aren't being processed. That is not a sensible policy on any approach. And as for a returns agreement, I've always said we're not going to be part of the EU scheme. That is for EU members. We're not an EU member. We've never wanted to, or asked, or sought to be part of that scheme. We're not going to be part of that scheme. Thank you very much. I've got George from the FT. George.
Yes, Prime Minister. Can I ask you about the economy? You've spoken about your desire to have closer trade ties with the European Union. I just wondered if there's anything you've heard here today or in the last 2 weeks in the talks you and your colleagues have had with your European counterparts to encourage you to be more ambitious about what you're seeking, and when talks on the economy might begin. And since everyone else is asking two questions...
I knew this would happen. I should have stopped it with Nick in the first one.
Well, I think it's quite an important one. You mentioned the tragedy in the English Channel on Wednesday. The fact that some of the migrants were picked up by a British boat and then returned to Calais, I think that's quite unusual, isn't it? Is that significant, and does that show some new spirit of cooperation on this issue?
Well, let me, on the economy, look, I've been pretty explicit here and previously that we want to seek a reset with our relationship with Europe. I said that in my opening remarks here. I've said it before the election and since the election. And the impression I get is that there's a real appetite for that. You will all have probably spoken to some of the other leaders who've been in the meetings with us today, so you'll form your own view. But the appetite, I think, is for a UK which is, as it were, back on the international scene, playing a leading part with maturity and with a different stance in relation to our relations with Europe, both inside the EU and beyond. And yes, we do want to get a better deal than the deal that we've got at the moment. We understand the challenge and constraints of any discussion, of course we do. But I do think there's a closer relationship to be had that includes trade, that includes education and research, and includes security. That is partly what we mean by the reset. I think that's understood by our partners and colleagues here. And my strong impression is that we've been able to make some real progress today. But as I say, you've interviewed some of them on the way out. I haven't, so you'll have formed your own view in relation to that. On the question of the operation that you referred to, yes, it is. That was an operation that took people back to France. That's really an operational decision for those that are carrying out the exercise, and I think is done on a sort of operation-by-operation basis. There's no change of policy in relation to that. Thank you, George. I've got Madeleine from De Welt, I think.
Hi.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Madeleine Rutkowski, Die Welt. Europe is talking about building a stronger security architecture, and the UK wants to play a bigger role in that. What would that mean for the UK's nuclear deterrent? A German government official suggested that the UK could contribute to a European nuclear shield in case NATO skeptic Donald Trump gets elected. Is that something you would consider?
Well, thank you for raising that. I mean, the first thing I should say is that we are committed to the nuclear deterrent, and I've been very clear that that includes all of the necessary upgrades that are there to keep the capability in place. That was something I was able to make clear in NATO last week in Washington and touched on occasion today. I do think that this is more NATO really than EPC, that the UK does make a unique and really important contribution, particularly in Europe, when it comes to security, because of the nuclear element, but because actually we stand full square on NATO. We were, as a Labour government, proud signatories to the original NATO treaty, which is in Brussels at NATO headquarters, with the signature of our Secretary of State on it. And we are as committed today. It's an unshakable commitment to NATO. My own personal assessment is that NATO is as important, if not more important today, than it's been for many years. And so that's where we stand on that question. Thank you. We've got Oliver from the Times. Oliver.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Just following up on Beth's question, both Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have been very clear and expressed extreme scepticism about continued American support for Ukraine. Without preempting the election result, what is your message to them from this summit? And also, if I may, 2 weeks ago you were in Camden casting your vote in the general election. Now you're hosting world leaders at Blenheim. That's been a bit of a whirlwind. On a human level, how strange has it been?
Look, I'm not going to preempt what may happen, but look, the stance we take is important. The stance that we took in Washington at the NATO conference mattered because it was intended to show, to Russia in particular, the resolve last week of the NATO countries, a bigger NATO, a stronger NATO, a NATO with increased resolve to stand up to Russian aggression. That was then repeated today. That matters as a signal, as a stance. And what we're able to do both last week and this week is to make clear that is in relation to Russian aggression, in relation to Ukraine, of course, but also Russian aggression in other forms that pretty well all of the countries represented here have experienced in relation to misinformation, cyber, you name it. And Moldova, of course, so it's very, very important that stance is seen not just as a reflection of current mood, which it is, but also as a signal to Russia of our resolve. Look, in relation to the situation, Camden is a fine place, and I was very proud to cast my vote in Camden. But look, we've worked really hard to get into a position to win an election. We've spent 14 years in opposition, arguing about what ought to happen, what must happen. Now we get the chance to actually deliver for the country. I hope that in the last 2 weeks I've been able to at least give the sense of how we intend to go about that task as a task of service, a government of service, serving those that voted for us and those that didn't vote for us, and a government that says it's country first, party second, and therefore no more gimmicks, no more party policy sort of masquerading as a serious answer to a question, but driven by service. And to reset on the international stage alongside that, so the sense of a government of service, but then the international stage as well to cement some of the relationships which we've been building in opposition. Many of the meetings I've had today were not meetings for the first time, but they are take on a different character. That's something that I came into politics to do. I came into politics late in life. I didn't come in to sit on the opposition benches, voting and losing every night. I've tried that, didn't like it very much. It is much better to be able to deliver on the change that I think is desperately needed across our country. Thank you very much. Antonella.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Your predecessor, Rishi Sunak, built up a special relationship with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. Are you going to have the same very close and friendly relations with her, and why? And secondly, if I may, as he was here, what do you think of the appeasing behavior of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban towards Russia? Did you discuss Did you discuss that with him today? Thank you.
Look, in relation to my predecessor, firstly, can I say something which you didn't ask, but I do think is important? I think he's been incredibly statesmanlike and generous since the election, if I may say so, and I thought he made that very clear in the way that he replied to the King's speech yesterday. The relationship that he struck up with Italy was important. I think we've got a long history between our two countries. And we've both had the opportunity today to make clear that we want to continue with that strength of relationship between the UK and Italy. That is a good thing. And so we build on the relationship that Rishi Sunak put in place rather than start in a different place. And I think that's been an important part of the discussions I've been able to have here today. As for the discussions I've had with individual leaders, then I'm not going to start going into the details of those, as you would imagine. Part of the purpose of these meetings is to have the opportunity to discuss issues of mutual concern with leaders of, in this case, 46 European countries or entities. And that's been very good from our point of view. It's been a very successful session today of the EPC. I'm very pleased that we've been able to host it, and to be able to host it here in this splendid place with the weather, which we can't take the credit for, has added to the real sense that Britain is back on the world stage. And I'm really pleased that most of the leaders, if not all of them, are leaving here with a sense of renewed confidence in their relationship with the UK, with a real understanding of what we mean by a reset, and I think looking forward to deepening the bilateral relations that we have with all of them. That's been very much a theme of today. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.
OK, and that was the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, there speaking at Blenheim Palace at the European Political Community Summit. Loads to unpack. Let's bring you up to speed if you're just joining us now. The Prime Minister started by talking about Ukraine. He said, "We will stand for Ukraine as long as it takes." Ukraine is fighting not just for its own freedom, but for all of the European people. On closer ties with the European Union, when Sir Keir Starmer was asked about that, he says it's not just a good idea to work with our European partners. it's essential for illegal immigration in particular. On Ursula von der Leyen, who was elected again for a second time as the President of the European Commission today, he said, I want to congratulate Ursula von der Leyen on her election. He talked about continually smashing the gangs as the solution, closer ties with Europol at The Hague, increasing the UK presence at Europol, a deal with Slovakia and a deal with Slovenia. He also then said he was announcing today a new deal, £84 million, a package for projects for Africa and the Middle East, training and aid to try and stop immigration downstream, as he kept saying. He then said about Macron earlier, said there is no silver bullet to solve illegal immigration. He picked up on that. He said if there was a silver bullet, it would have been fired a long time ago. So clearly no quick solutions. He blamed the Conservatives quite a lot for the situation the country is in. He said we're inheriting a really bad problem here. Nobody said this was going to be easy. He didn't rule out an offshore containment deal with Albania, an Albania-style deal, but he did, a key point, he did rule out there is not going to be any part of any European Union return scheme. So a lot of people have been talking about that. Sir Keir Starmer categorically denying that would be the case. He said there's a better deal to be had with the EU, so much to unpack. No doubt that will continue in the next show. Jude and Co. Fantastic. Thanks for your time on the company today. Now it's your weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi again, here's your latest GB News weather forecast coming to you from the Met Office. Temperatures are going to be rising. Plenty of fine weather for many parts of the UK. However, in the northwest, there will still be quite a bit of cloud as we go through the end of the week and further rain to come too. We currently have a weather system which is gradually making its way a little bit further eastwards, but this is going to break up as we go through the day. So a little bit less rain overnight, and any rain over Scotland likely to be confined just to the higher ground, and most other places turning dry. After a warm evening across England and Wales in particular, it is going to be a warm night. Not a huge amount of cloud around, but temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Some places staying with temperatures around 17 or 18 degrees. First thing tomorrow morning, there could be a few pockets of mist and fog around western parts of England and Wales perhaps, but for much of England and Wales it is going to be a fine start. Plenty of sunshine, and with that temperatures are going to start to rise pretty quickly. A cloudier story though across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Perhaps not as cloudy as today, but nonetheless a few spots of rain are possible as we go through the morning. Perhaps the brightest weather will be across more eastern parts of Scotland. A greater chance of seeing some sunshine here. Through the day we are going to see a bit more cloud building across far western parts of Scotland. In the Outer Hebrides, some rain pushing its way in here, and there could be some strong blustery winds to go with it. Elsewhere, and for Scotland, Northern Ireland, a drier day than today and a little bit brighter at times, but the best of the sunshine will be across much of England and Wales, and with that temperatures rising higher than today, highs of around 31 Celsius in the southeast, but everywhere it is going to feel relatively hot. As we go through the evening, we are going to see a bit more cloud and rain feeding into far northwestern parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but staying fine towards the southeast. There will be some wet weather pushing its way through as we go through Saturday and into Sunday, but Saturday could stay hot in the southeast. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Gary King. Anti-clockwise in Kent on the M25, looking very busy at the moment, approaching the Dartford tunnels, taking around 35-40 minutes or so to get through. Also in Hertfordshire on the clockwise M25, long delays from junction 22 at St Albans towards 25 at Enfield, not helped by roadworks. In Berkshire, the westbound M4, there's a lane closed and long delays after a vehicle fires between the M25 and junction 5 at Langley. In Essex, the A12 southbound is currently closed. Long delays there due to a car fire between junction 25 at Marks Tay and junction 24 at Kelvedon North. And in Northamptonshire, the southbound M1, there's a lane closed after a breakdown between junction 15 at Northampton and 14 at Milton Keynes. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
It's our summer treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Our